In case you're just joining us, we are in the middle of a poll session. We'll be done in a couple more minutes, and then we'll do our review of it. So even if you aren't seeing it, it's okay, because we want to talk about it here in a moment. Little reminder about the video policy: need to have full faces on video. Margie is our moderator, and of course this is being recorded, so we want to make sure that we have good files and can prove to the commission that you are all complying as they require. Full faces on video, top to bottom, well lit, all that fun stuff.
Next person to buy one of our Fuel
the YouTube video you were playing gets stepped on by the other YouTube video in the queue. Okay, Mr. Beast, pretty fun, but not applicable. Okay, here we go. Let's do a little bit of review. Most of you are finished. I'm going to share the results. Hopefully everybody can see those, and we'll talk it over. This one had a few, I thought, moments of ambiguity. I'm going to revise a lot of these poll questions, try to make them a little more clear. So if you're reading some things, sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, is it going to be this confusing on the actual test? Keep in mind, we make the poll questions to help you review the material. Some of us do better at it and sometimes than others. I've written plenty of difficult to understand questions, so I'm going to revise and come back. But the whole point though is to talk about it. Sometimes we write them in there intentionally ambiguous so that we can say, hey, see this? Yeah, we need to look at the best answer. And the whole point is to kind of review the whole thing. So number 1, control of the nation's money supply and economy is regulated by what? No question there, 100% correct. Good job. The Federal Reserve. Not so Federal Reserve is in place to help regulate the economy. Good work there. A participant in the secondary market who offers insurance risk. Okay. Secondary market, meaning that marketplace where loans are bought and sold, right? And we have some players in that game. The loan products include the conventional type of loan, the FHA type of loan, the VA type of loan. So which one offers insurance risk? Well, with a conventional loan, see, risk versus remedy for the risk, right? With a conventional loan, there's something in place. What is it in place that the lender requires if the borrower puts less than 20% down? What is that thing called? There it is, Jennifer. Private mortgage insurance, PMI. There you go. So there's an insurance risk component in a conventional loan, and then an FHA loan has a similar thing, and that's same letters, different arrangement, but same idea, MIP, mortgage insurance premium, again, because the borrower's putting less than 20% in the loan, down payment, equity, walking in with less than 20% equity. What's another little note about an FHA loan that might not be that attractive to a borrower? If a borrower could afford to do a conventional loan or an FHA loan, they qualify for either one. Why might a lender suggest they go with conventional? What is it about MIP and an FHA loan? Remember, on a conventional loan, that PMI can go away. Once you hit 20% equity in the property through several different ways, you could reach that level. The PMI can go away, but the MIP never does. Thank you, Jennifer. Perfect. And then a VA loan, it's guaranteed by the government. An FHA loan is insured by the government. So just a little review there, probably best choice there. Insurance risk offered, all of the above would probably be the best answer there. They all have an insurance risk component. The type of loan which has no guarantees provided by a federal agency. Okay. This one is another one where the wording might be confusing. So we literally just said an FHA loan is insured by the government and a VA loan is guaranteed by the government. And here's this word guarantee showing up. So it might be fresh on your mind. You might be thinking guarantee, that's the VA one. So therefore VA is the answer. Fair point. Got it. And if I were the one who were grading this test for you, I'd probably have to give you at least partial credit, if not full credit, because the word guarantee. We could make it more applicable. We could kind of put a different slant on it if we said something like the type of loan which has no safety net provided by a federal agency, right? Instead of guarantee, instead of the word guarantee, because we are so conditioned to say the guaranteed by the government is the VA loan, the insured by the government is the FHA loan, right? So if it was safety net provided by a federal agency, then FHA and VA would not work because they have safety nets provided by a government agency. What does not is a conventional loan, right? They are neither insured nor guaranteed by the government. So I can't tell you which one of you is right here because it's sort of too ambiguous to call. But the point is made. The goal is accomplished by reviewing the material. Which document is used to determine a veteran's level of benefit? Remember, the certificate of reasonable value is the VA rendition of an appraisal. That's what is done on a VA financed home to see if it's worth it, to see if the VA is going to be willing to be involved and actually if the lender is going to be willing to finance the home. A certificate of eligibility is what we're looking for, and most of you got that right. Good job. That is what determines how much the lender is going to be able to help the veteran's level of benefit based on their type of discharge, whether honorable or dishonorable, based on their service record. Discharge paperwork, no, we didn't ever see anything about that. I guess, yeah, it's just not specific enough. So that would not be the right answer. FICO scores, nobody fell for that one. Good job. Loans traditionally considered to be assumable are what? So we know that VA loans can be assumed. What about if we add a word in here? Loans traditionally considered to be historically non-qualifying assumable. Remember, you could have a VA loan assumed by a non-veteran. Still could, but it's got to be a qualifying assumable now. So you could end up with a non-veteran having a VA loan. The problem with that for the veteran is the person that they let assume their veteran loan is using up their eligibility. They can't get another one themselves until that loan is paid off, refinanced maybe into a normal kind of loan with that other person who they sold it to. So their eligibility would be tied up. Probably the reason that most assumables aren't really a thing. What term would in a promissory note probably block assumption? That concept of assuming a contract. Selling a property, letting somebody assume a loan. That lender has a couple of provisions built in, a couple of A words, acceleration clause, alienation clause. Another word for one of these is due on sale. Which one of these also means due on sale clause? It's the most foreign looking one out of these. Oh, clue, alien, right? Alien, different. Alienation clause, also called due on sale. Alienation meaning we are separating ourselves from the loan, right? From the property, I should say. We're selling it, therefore we got to pay this loan off. And so if you were going to try to let someone assume your loan, but your lender found out and they said, oh, no, you're the one we wanted to have this loan with, not that person, therefore pay us everything now. Due on sale. To protect the lender in the event of foreclosure on a non-government backed loan, the lender would require what? Okay, non-government backed. So we're talking about conventional. And the word for that type of insurance involved in a conventional mortgage is PMI, private mortgage insurance. Title insurance is a classic example of something that could just really be confusing. We were thinking about the word insurance, so we keyed in on that. There's 3 of them with that word in it. And we know we saw the whole phrase title insurance before, but this is where you just have to know the topics. Oh, title insurance, that's a different component to this whole process altogether. That's insurance to protect the title or the deed of the property. Now we're talking about insurance to protect the lender in case of default, and the buyer gets to pay for that privilege, for that insurance policy. So the first 2 are typically going to be the confusing ones, mortgage insurance premium or private mortgage insurance. So Nobody fell for the MIP, so good job there. Organizations responsible for funding the consumer loan market are in the what? So where is the money actually coming from? The money that is being loaned out is coming from the purchase and sale of the packaged up loans on the secondary market, right? Those thousands of loans being packaged up or more, similar types of risk. So secondary market is good answer there. And then the next one might help this make more sense. Originators of consumer loans are in which market? Sometimes you'll read a test question and it will kind of spur your memory on for another question. That's why a good strategy might have been here if you were taking the test. If you were the least bit confused by 8, just skip it, because you would have gotten on to the next one. Originators of consumer loans are in which market? Primary. Those loans made on the street to individuals one by one, primary market. Oh, wait, okay, in light of that, maybe what they were getting at with 8 is the secondary market. Funding happens on the secondary market, so the chunks of loans can be bought and sold, and money can be made to then be loaned out again to more individuals in the primary market. So freely use that skip question button. Don't get crazy, but if you are confused, if you just can't decide between A or B or C or 3 or 4, I think they go by numbers, skip it. Come back to it. Maybe when you're fresh, maybe another question between now and when you come back to that one would have helped you remember something that could help you answer that correctly. The measurement used to determine how much principal and interest is needed over a period of time to pay off a loan is what? Okay, more ambiguity, sort of. Certainly, PI, principal and interest, is affected by interest rates. Yes, that is true. Frankly, it's also affected by number of payments, because the shorter the loan term, the higher the payment is going to be. But what they were getting at here, where did we see something in terms of the math calculations which said, here's how you just determine the principal and interest? I believe the best answer on this one is probably loan factor, because measurement used to determine how much PI is needed over a period of time. We look on the chart for the interest rate and the term, the period of time, and we get a loan factor. And when we multiply that by the number of thousands in the loan amount, that gives us our PI. I believe that's the point. That was the point of this question. Hope you are leaning heavily on the practice exams as well as the syllabus, because again, syllabus is your friend. That is something that the people who wrote the test made for you to prepare this with. So prepare for this. So don't forget to use that. Make sure that is an important part of your studies. Here we go. And here we go. All right. Again, some parts of the syllabus are a little more comprehensive than others. Some of them give you actual definitions. Other ones just give you words, but it tells you then know what you need to go look up the definition for. So hopefully you've been making a nice review sheet for yourself out of the syllabus. Next step here in the next week or so is for you to print out a new clean syllabus, use it to quiz yourself. See how much of that thing, unit by unit, you can fill out from memory. Oh, can't quite remember this word, mark it. Keep on going through the section of syllabus you're working in, the chapters of the book, then come back to it and see how you did. Sort of like a little miniature test. Wouldn't it be awful if you had to get this exam, if you had to get this license by filling in the blanks of all the syllabus? So just like when you run a marathon or even a 5K, that's 3.2 miles. Maybe you should train and run 5-mile races so that when you actually run on race day, the 3.2 is like, I've done 5, I can do this. Same thing here. Maybe you prepare yourself to, what if I had to fill in the blanks of the syllabus? Oh, I don't. I get to do multiple choice on the test. Kind of helps maybe with the stress level in the test some. And then as you're going through the syllabus, flipping back through the book, hopefully margins have been marked, highlights have been made. So as you're flipping through book pages, you're not having to read the entire page. You can just key in on the 3 or 4 important points of that page. Property management, which is what we're going to pick up now, has a lot of words to come up with definitions to, and a decent amount of things that are already filled in. There it is. Net lease, graduated lease, index lease, full service lease, ground lease. Ground lease is leasing the dirt, having your own building that you own on dirt that you rent, right? Full service lease means the expenses are being paid, the utilities are being paid. Net lease is dependent upon what? What's the net lease calculated by using? What do they use to calculate the net lease with? I'm not sure how my participles and whatnot are being used properly today. What's a net lease? There's a better question. Simple. Keep it simple. Net lease. What is a percentage lease versus a net lease? One of them is based on tenant paying based on their income, how much they made that month. They're going to pay a rent in the form of a percentage of their profit or their income. Which one is the income-based one? Percentage lease or net lease? Yeah, there it is. So therefore, what is the net lease based upon? If not income, what's the opposite of income? Yeah, there you go. Maybe that's the way to remember it, right? One is based on income, one is based on expenses. The tenant's going to, and in real life, they probably are going to pay a base rent plus a portion of their rent based upon the profit or the income, or base rent plus expenses, or a portion of the expenses. What was an acronym for types of expenses that we might see in rental? There it is. What does TICAM stand for? What's the CAM? Yeah, common area maintenance. I don't know. I think of it like HOA fees, sort of. You know, that you're paying somebody to take care of the common areas. So this is in an office park, maybe some sort of commercial property. Got to pay somebody to keep that elevator lobby nice, keep the hallways nice. The T and the I is the same T and I that we saw in PITI, taxes and insurance. A lot of crossover. And the best practice for remembering this stuff is to compare it. Compare the non-freehold estates to the freehold estates. See what a contract looks like compared to a lease. And then see what a property management agreement looks like compared to a listing agreement. Speaking of which, property management agreement, as related to a listing agreement, must also be in writing. Listing agreement, you can't have an oral listing agreement. You can have an oral buyer agency agreement, but we're talking about dealing with owners. With a listing agreement, we're talking about sellers. With a property management agreement, we're talking about owners who want to keep it, but they want to rent it out. You're going to manage that rental process for them. So this property management agreement is what says how you're going to do it. It says what they are expecting from you and what you're going to give to them. The one big difference between the listing agreement and the property management agreement is the duration. Listing agreement dies. It has an expiration date. It's either going to expire or it's going to be terminated because you were successful, or a couple of other unhappy reasons in there, but you're done. You can't say, oh, you're hiring me to list your property. That means you will hire me to list every property you ever own, ever, forever in your whole life. No, I wish. I'd be finished. I would never have to make another prospecting call again. After 26 years, the listings I've done in 26 years, if they had to come back to me and I didn't have to go ask them to and earn it all over again, I don't want to admit how many of them over the years, because each one kind of stings a little bit, sometimes call you or Facebook you because they ran and, oh, you know what? You helped me 10 years ago. I'm so excited. We just sold our house. We're buying a new one across town. And you're like, does not compute. You want me to be happy for you, but you're telling the guy that I think you should have hired, you should have remembered. Sometimes they just get caught up in the moment. They forget the person is right in front of them, giving them a hard sales pitch, and they just want to make it happen. They don't want to stop and remember to call you. It goes back to, were you front of mind? Did you do a good enough job staying in the top of their consciousness? You don't want to bug them, but you also don't want to be in that situation either. It's probably going to happen at least once over the time that you're in this business. It's inevitable. Especially right now, there's a lot of competition. Not to say it's heavy competition, because a lot of them aren't doing that much, but maybe there's that one sale, that one agent who's getting one sale a year. The one they got is your past client. Could happen because they were sitting in that open house. Client got super excited. They said, oh gosh, we don't want to miss this one. Can we put in an offer? And when the dust settles a couple days later, when it's all locked down, oh yeah, she helped me last time. Maybe I should have called her. And they're into this, maybe a dual agency situation. Who knows? Well, on the property management side, you can be their go-to for a longer term. It can be built in. It can have a renewal clause, because if you're an owner and you just want somebody to handle the renting of your property, I know I wouldn't want to have to re-interview a bunch of people every single year, or every so often. As long as the one I hired is doing well, doing a good job, I'm rolling with them. So good that is in here. There is a renewal clause potentially, if you want there to be. Just like the listing agreement, there's some things in the property management agreement that look similar. The description of the property, let's make sure we're on board with what we are managing. You might own 10 of them. Which one are you giving me? All of them or just this one? What is it? What is the period of time? What are the manager's responsibilities versus the owner? The owner is going to do some stuff versus what the manager's doing. How often will the manager report back? I would think at least monthly, but they may want some certain kind of interaction. I want a phone call every week. Oh, while you're trying to find a tenant, I want you to check in with me every day because I need to get this thing profitable again. It's just sitting there costing me money right now. How you doing filling it up? Check in with me more frequently now, and then once you do find the tenant, then less frequently. And then how might this property management agreement go away? What are some methods of termination that would be spelled out in the agreement? Here's a highly testable question. The things a property manager would never do for their owner client. They would not make decisions on capital improvements. They might suggest them. They might say, look, I've noticed that the other two complexes in the area that we are direct competitors with have a really nice swimming pool area. Ours is looking kind of dated. You might want to look into improving that, but they would not make them. They wouldn't say, hey, okay, hey, owner client, this month I spent $80,000 of your money to make the pool nicer. Yeah, that's not the way it can be, right? And they don't make capital improvements. They don't reinvest profits. They just give the owner the profits, right? They take their portion that they are earning and they give the owner their piece, but they don't say, hey, this month I invested in Bitcoin for you. You're welcome. Pause for group gasping at the idea of that. They don't pay the owner's income tax. The owner should have a different professional for that. We have a broker's license. Property managers have broker licenses. They are also non-provisional, by the way. But that owner should have a CPA to talk about tax things with. So we as property managers would not pay their income tax, and we wouldn't establish a depreciation schedule. That's another tax-related thing. That's something best handled by a CPA as well. So these 4 things, they could throw that question to you and swap out one of these answers for any number of real estate sounding terms that might be convincing. So you just need to know what these things are. You know what? I've never seen an acronym for this. We might need to come up with our own acronym for this, unless Margie knows of one. How could we get away with no acronym? There's acronyms everywhere. We'll work on that. The management plan outlines the owner's objectives, and just like in a listing agreement for helping someone sell, where you show them what similar houses have sold for, where you talk about, oh, here's the absorption rate, here's how many things have sold recently, here's what else is on the market. You know, on a listing appointment, we don't only talk about the sales, the things that have sold, we also talk about the things that are active. We want to help our owner client, seller client, understand, look, you're not the only one on the block. What are they going to go look at after they leave your house? And we're kind of shifting back to that being more important. Used to be that there weren't very many others for the people to look at, but now we're getting more normalized. So we need to have that discussion again. Well, same thing here on the property management agreement. The duties of the property manager include, let's analyze our competition. What's the neighborhood looking like? What do people in this area want to rent? Is this something that fits their needs? Are they expecting more than we are providing? Or are we giving too much for the money? And property analysis. Here's what similar things are going for. Here's what we've been asking. And it might be a kind of just an offshoot of what the owner did when they bought it. When they bought it, they looked at the financials. Maybe one reason they bought it was because they saw some things needed to be updated, like the rents could be increased. So we could maybe increase our net operating income by having higher gross income from which to subtract expenses. Oh, and also, what are some of these expenses they're paying money on? We don't need to do all that. And then this is just an extension of that. That property manager is going to just keep a watch on the property financials and see what ways we can improve. And they'll do that with these financial statements: operating budget, cash flow report, income and expenses. Here's what's going on. Here's the health of the business. Just like if it were a coffee shop or a bicycle shop or any other business, here's what's coming in, here's what's going out. We see our friend, the given formula again, and now we have a perspective in terms of a rental property. It maybe makes more sense. We're starting at gross income, ending at NOI, but then again, factoring out for debt service to get to cash flow. Maybe that owner, that property manager, is helping that owner understand, I've been making money on this. Do I want to own it outright? Do I want to refinance it, pull some money out of it, and go buy another one? Since we got good at this now, there's an opportunity down the street. Somebody's getting out of the business. I could buy it for pennies on the dollar or a steep discount. Maybe I need to use some of the equity in this one to go buy that one. And they would be looking at these numbers to help figure that out. Very common duty that we would all guess would be a prime responsibility of the property manager is finding the tenants, getting them approved. That owner investor has other things to do, like spending their money in other places. They just want to pay somebody to go interview they're not sitting down interviewing tenants. That's when you're paying a property manager, they're sorting through all those applications. Can you imagine the number of applications property managers are sorting through nowadays? There's a lot more potential renters than there are properties to rent. And the prices are up. So it's a big part of their duties. Maintaining the property, the bigger the property, the more that involves, might be a staff. They have a responsibility for environmental. Again, sort of the bigger the property, the more that is. Trash removal. The tenants are throwing away things. What are they throwing away? Let's make sure the owner of the property, as we'll see in the environmental chapter, could be held liable for these sorts of things, any sort of environmental damages. They could have to pay for this stuff. They could even have to pay for something a previous owner is the culprit of, because the money has to come from somewhere. So it kind of goes hand in hand with that. We'll talk more about that. We left off here. Left off with the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. We're going to talk about it in Fair Housing Today, actually. ADA oversees the service animal side of things. Service animals fall under Americans with Disabilities Act. The fact that you can't charge them a pet fee if they have a service animal. Well, property managers have to be familiar with ADA requirements because other people are occupying this property by that owner. If it's an apartment complex, all the more, because now they've got other people as tenants coming through, but also other people as employees coming through. And you've got to have certain things, bathroom accessibility, just accessibility in general, making it fair and equally accessible by the disabled as anyone else. In terms of building amenities, in terms of can your employees get around? Are you hiring that employee in the wheelchair? You better be able to give them equal accessibility. Falls on the shoulders of the property manager. They also help the owner with risk compliance, risk management. They would, first of all, help the owner know where they need to remove the source of risk. Is the fence around the pool in good repair? Is it working? Or are people able to get through it, get past it? The gate broke, the lock broke. Oh, got to fix that right away. Insurance issue. They help them understand and shop for policies. What policy do we need? Need to have some sort of a policy with proper deductible, risk control. You can't control if somebody's a bad cook or not. And how bad are they? So bad that things catch on fire a lot. So you can't just avoid that. You can't say no cooking allowed. So controlling that risk, having proper fire protection, having those sprinklers serviced on a regular basis. What kind of fire protection? Is it the water kind? Is it the chemical kind? What does that look like? Fire doors where the fire could be held at bay long enough for people to get out. When it comes to things like single family homes that might be rented out, I had that listing that had that holdover tenant, the daughter's boyfriend guy. They had taken out all of the sheetrock in the garage, in the ceiling. And what you'll learn in the business is that sheetrock has a fire suppression component. And that would be a major issue for the insurance provider to find out, oh, if a fire broke out in the garage, which isn't all that unlikely, probably the most likely place a fire might break out besides the kitchen, there's nothing to stop it. It's just going to flood straight on into the house because there was no sheetrock anymore. They took it down to have access to storage in the trusses above. So an insurance provider, if that were going to be a rental, which it was actually in this case, if the insurance company knew that that was the way it was, a property manager would be there to tell that owner, look, you got to do this. You need to put this back up. There needs to be fire protection here. And then transferring that risk in the form of insurance policies. What policy do I need for this property? That's going to be something the property manager will help the owner figure out, understand, shop for. There's a little bit of math, and then we're done with this chapter. The math has to do with what a property manager can make. Some of that math, it's easier to figure because you're thinking, oh, this is money in my pocket. But commissions somehow are mysteriously good, easier to figure out. So how much rent is being collected? The property manager is most usually paid as a percentage of the rent collected. So if monthly rent is collected for $2,525 and the property manager is managing the property for 9% of that every month, What is 9% of 25.25? Property manager's monthly commission is $227.50. What does that mean for the year for this property? This is my one little single family house that I'm managing for someone, and I'm making $227 a month to do so. Hopefully the hours you spend managing that property is worth to you making $227 a month. Maybe I want to do 10 of them. This owner, other owners, maybe I'm managing for lots of different owners and I've got 10 of these or 12. Take that monthly commission. What's that monthly commission per year? $227 a month turns into $27.27 per year for this one property. And it's not just this one. I've grown my little property management business to 10. Throw a zero on the end of that. Now you're making $27,270 a year managing 10 properties. If they're getting rent of $25.25 and you're being paid 9%. That is the end of property management. Let's look at the property management agreement. Looks like this. Oops. Trying to zoom in for you. Hang on a second. Sorry. My favorite way to zoom is not working. Do it this way. All right, we have parties at the top. By and between who as owner, fill in the blank as owner, and who as what? Oh, like the listing agreement, the name of the firm is going to be in there as agent, right? In consideration of the blah, blah, blah legal stuff, this and that and the other, where is it, right? City, county, street address, other description. Are there more parcels than just this? We're not going to go through this whole thing. Here's the duration of it. It'll be binding when signed by both parties. Legal, right? That's just standard. It shall become effective on such and such date. So binding versus effective. Binding meaning, yeah, this is really a thing between us. Now we're in a contract together, a property management agreement together, but maybe we're not needing to start the work yet. Right, it'll be effective next month. We'll go ahead and sign it today so you'll know the work is guaranteed, but you don't need to start actually being a property manager until this future date. For an initial term of blank, fill in the blank, and then all caps. Oh boy, all caps are important. Not less than blank days before conclusion of the initial term. Either party may notify the other one in writing if they want to terminate. In which case it shall terminate at the conclusion of the initial term. If not so terminated, the agreement shall automatically renew. There it is. That is what you will not find in a listing agreement. Big difference. Here's the big difference. For successive terms of blank, maybe they put in how long those terms are, unless either party gives the other party, again, written notice. So automatic, this one has it built in, automatic renewal unless terminated otherwise. How are we going to pay that property manager? Lots of different ways are possible here. They've got it built in to pay them with a percentage of the total gross rental income received. It could also be a per month for each month the property is occupied. It could be blank per month that the property is vacant. How much work is that manager doing when it's occupied versus vacant? Maybe those are worth two different amounts. And then a big fat tempting other to fill in the blank as needed, maybe a flat fee. The agent may from time to time provide services or arrange services from third parties relating to maintenance, repair, or other improvements, and the owner agrees to compensate agent for the provision or arrangement of such services in the following manner. Depending on the ticket, price tag of these various services maybe the property manager foots the bill themselves and they bill the owner later for it. Or maybe it's such a large outlay of money that the owner needs to put down or give them some money up front and do it. However that is, they're going to nail that down here so there's no rude surprises. What if the tenant wants to buy it? If the tenant occupying the property enters into an agreement to purchase anytime during the term of this agreement or during the initial term of the lease, owner pays agent a fee of blank. So sort of a built-in sale commission, maybe a fee. Oh, this tenant wanted to buy it, so let's put that in here and address that possibility. I'm going to, if I haven't already, I don't think I have, I'm going to put this in the Google Drive so you can kind of look through it and identify what I would suggest you do is take the listing agreement and take this and identify similarities between the two, sort of like what we're doing. It's got authority and responsibilities of agent, same kind of thing in the listing agreement, talks about what the agent's going to be responsible for, has some details on providing monthly statements. And remember, this is the one provided by the Realtor Association. So this was made by the North Carolina Association of Realtors with the North Carolina Bar. They talk about making arrangements on the owner's behalf for repairs, answer tenant requests and complaints, and perform the duties imposed upon the owner by tenant leases, all the stuff you would imagine that a owner would want to spend the money on a property manager for, so they don't have to hear the complaints and deal with them themselves. Retain such amounts from owner's rental proceeds as may be necessary to pay expenses with management and operation. Agent will establish and maintain a fund on the owner's behalf of blank amount from which expenses may be paid. The owner might need to set aside money that the property manager has access to pay for these things. You can tell all of the things that pop up in the normal course of property management business in real life have turned into a part of this form. Institute and prosecute such proceedings in small claims court to recover rents due the owner from tenants or to evict. Another major reason a person might be interested in paying a property manager to not have to be in court all day. This one is huge. And then a nice fill in the blank of whatever other provisions you might want to put in there. Cooperating amounts of compensation. This comes to the point where an agent might bring a tenant for the property. What are we going to do if another real estate agent finds a tenant? Are we going to pay them? Are we going to try to get tenants from other agents? And you can do a search for rentals in the MLS. The bottom of the page, just like for the commission on a sale, it says, here's how much you're going to make if your tenant client actually rents our property. Sort of like the level of a BPO. It's not going to make you rich. It does in California. I mean, good grief. I've seen some of those shows where they make $5,000 for placing a tenant. We're not seeing that. It's probably going to be maybe a couple of $100, maybe a percentage of the first month's rent, something like that. But that would be spelled out. How much are we going to pay an agent to bring somebody? The marketing component looks a lot like what we see in the listing agreement. Going to let me put up a sign or no? Pertinent information. It might be if it's a single family dwelling in a certain neighborhood, you can't put a sign up. There are sign restrictions and requirements for such. Some neighborhoods say you can put up a sign, but it can't just be the sign you got from Walmart. You got to have a sign made. And now automatically think, okay, at least $100 or more, because it's got to fit their aesthetic. Advertise the property in non-internet media. What is this thing? Non-internet media they speak of. Just kidding. And permit other firms to advertise it. Listing service. They're talking about posting it, giving me permission to put it in the MLS or put it on the internet to find tenants. Same stuff we see on the listing agreement continues. The owner is not under bankruptcy protection. The property is not subject to foreclosure. All past, current taxes, anything that could be a lien is not one. They have all been paid. What is the owner responsible for? all costs and expenses for maintenance and operation, including, look at this one, but not limited to the placement of new batteries in a battery-operated smoke or carbon monoxide alarm at the beginning of the tenancy. But again, they're required to do it at the beginning, and then the tenant does it after the fact. But, best practice, if I'm the owner, I want to make sure batteries are still getting put in there. That tenant's probably not thinking about the well-being of the property. They may not be, until the thing chirps and bugs them to death. They're not too worried about the batteries. And when it does chirp, what do people do when that thing chirps at 2 a.m.? You go to 24/7 Walmart and buy a 9-volt real quick before you go back to bed. You just knock it off the wall with the broom, don't you? You take that thing apart. You pull that battery out of there, and it might get replaced tomorrow or maybe next month or maybe next year. Sometimes you take pictures of a listing and you're focused on the room and how pretty it is. And then when you're looking back at the photo, you're like, oh, the smoke detector's hanging open on the ceiling. I guess I need to retake those pictures. It's not a good look, right, in your marketing. Oh, here is some fair housing language. We're going to talk about fair housing today, but just like in the listing agreement, just like in every agency agreement, because indeed this is one, got to have this language, all caps, making sure everybody's fully aware. We won't do anything that would prevent the agent from offering the property in compliance with all federal and state laws, regulations, ethical duties, prohibiting discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, handicap, familial status. Those are the 7 federally protected classes. The National Association of Realtors in the last several years have added to that in all of their documents, which means all of the standard forms, the 7 classes plus 2 more. Because in the Realtor Code of Ethics, we are also not to block anybody on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, in this case, in the leasing of the property. This same very similar chunk, at least in terms of the categories, is in all of the agency agreements. Maintain insurance. The owner will maintain comprehensive general liability insurance, including damage, bodily injury, and the amount of not less than blank. So it's got certain minimums for coverage. And who is that insurance provider? What's their phone number? Might need to get a hold of them real quick sometime. Oh, went right past that break. Let's come back in 10 and we'll finish going over these documents, and then we'll get on into the other chapters today. Welcome back. Got some curls happening. Love it. I had a post-licensing student in her second career, that real estate was her second career. And I think she told me that she at the time was, I believe, 60 or 65. And she was always dressed fit to kill, perfect business suit. At the break, guys, she would go out in the hallway in her business skirt suit, find an alcove so she wouldn't be inappropriate, and hit the floor and do like 20 push-ups. She was killing it. She came back. We became friends. She came back a little blushy. She said, somebody came down the stairs and they may or may not have gotten a show while I was doing my push-ups at that last break. She was lovely. She is lovely. Talked to her a few months ago. Monique. And does more push-ups than I can. Thanks a lot, Monique. Continuing on, let's finish this up. Tenant security deposits. An agent may require tenants to make a security deposit in the amount permitted by law. We know that there are some regulations permitted by law as to the amount of security deposit that can be collected to secure tenants' lease obligations. If the agent requires them, they will be placed in a trust account in the agent's name in a North Carolina bank or savings and loan. Upon the commencement of the agreement, owner will deliver a list of any current tenants who have previously made TSDs under existing leases or in the amounts. So it just outlines where they're going to be kept. Pets, are we allowing them or are we not? Allowed or not? And case-by-case basis maybe. And whether or not they're allowed, a person who has demonstrated a need for an assistance animal which alleviates one or more symptoms or effects of an existing disability has the legal right to be accompanied by an assistance animal in the property. No pet fee may be charged. Cigarettes, prohibited or not? Is there an association? Let's acknowledge that. And who's going to pay? Who's going to handle those dues? Is the owner going to keep paying them, or are they going to hand that off to the property manager to do as well? From the proceeds of the rent, maybe the agent will pay those HOA dues. Check the box. The pleasant category, sewage disposal. It's served by either a septic tank or sewer. Are we renting out? Are we calling it the proper number of bedrooms? That applies to rentals just like sales. Can't rent out 5 bedrooms worth of people. Say, hey, this is a 5-bedroom home if it's on a septic tank that perks for 3, right? Spelled out there. That owner probably wouldn't mind making rent on a 5-bedroom, but oops, it's a 3-bedroom. And that's up to the agent to get that handled and help them understand what the law is about that. Occupancy limits. Generally limited to 2 people per bedroom, but there may be other factors. Owner represents service contracts below are in existence. So just outlining, is there a pest control service that comes out? Who's going to handle paying them? Ultimately, the owner pays them, but who's going to write the check? Maybe from the account where the owner set aside money, whatever it is, who's paying them when it comes due from the owner's money. More about the trust account. Entry by owner. Owner agrees that neither owner nor a third party that under their direction shall enter the property for any purpose whatsoever during any time that it is occupied in the absence of reasonable notice. There it is. Not that it is not allowed, but it's not allowed without providing reasonable notice. Lead-based paint applies here as well as for the sale side. Is it built prior to 78? Then the landlord's required to disclose that, because those little kids maybe might chew on window sills, I've been told. Maybe the raising and lowering of the window makes the paint kind of become dust into the air that gets breathed, and that is lead-based paint dust. All kinds of issues there. Has a thing about confidential information for tenants. Talks about termination. What happens if we sell the property? And then all the fun stuff at the end, that fast talking guy at the end of the car commercial, tax tag and title. These last few things. Oh, this is interesting. Surveillance devices. Oh boy. Owner agrees to disclose to agent if there are any. Cameras. We have cameras all the time, especially on the sales side, but on the rental side too. And this red box kind of sums it up. Maybe a crime to listen to or record an oral communication. Obviously, you can't have cameras in certain areas when you're dealing with property that other people access. And if you're renting it to somebody, that would also be a no-no. But the showings, even when you're showing the rental property or showing something for sale, there's still cameras. Maybe that owner put cameras up. They're not allowed to listen, but they are allowed to look. Again, during the time when perhaps tenants are being shown the property or buyers are being shown the properties for sale, they can leave those cameras up. They can watch them walk through the property, but they can't listen to what they're saying. How would they prove it? Not testable. Don't worry about that part. That's its own thing. If it all pops up and somebody's complaining, it might even come back to that owner has to prove that they didn't listen. And I don't know. We don't need to worry about that for our purposes. You just need to warn your owners and sellers, look, guys, you can leave your cameras up. You can even watch them, but it is illegal to listen. Can't listen. Little disclaimer that we see in the other agreements too. I'm going to give you real estate advice, not other advice, not attorney advice, insurance advice, tax, engineer, inspector, environmental, architect. I'm sure owners with property managers would love for that property manager to give them extra services, extra advice. And maybe some property managers are qualified or at least knowledgeable to do that, but that doesn't mean they're officially qualified to do that. Is there anything extra attached to this thing and blah, 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 sign here? That is the property management agreement. Here's the one for vacation rentals, where the one we just went through was, let me see, where'd it go? 8 pages. The vacation rental one is not that much less, but it's got some other differences. Mainly the time frame is different. They're legally the eviction process and the notices required to be given are all shorter, obviously, because the terms are shorter. But it's a lot of the same kind of stuff, just adapted for a shorter term kind of lease. And then finally, here's what our standard rental form looks like. The one that we can use, provide to clients as needed when it's a longer term rental. This is not the one you would use if it's one of those buyer possession for 3 days before closing or seller possession for a couple of days after. Sometimes the seller wants to stay for a longer time after. And the standard short form for seller possession after closing isn't good enough. If it's like a month, and I've had that before several times, sellers, especially downsizing sellers that have lived there for 30 years, they get freaked out on thinking of moving that entire house and all of its contents and all 5 kids worth of stuff that they left behind, selling it, figuring out how to pack it. They don't like the idea of having to do that in 3 days before closing. And what if the closing doesn't happen? All these sorts of things. So I've had success, especially in a seller-prone market, negotiating for that seller to be able to stay for much more than a few days, like a whole month after closing. We would use this form for that. A longer term rental contract, a longer term lease would be required for something more than just a few days. And here it is. I think it's like 16 pages. No, this one's only 8. Okay. You'll notice as we're not going to look at this in depth, but a lot of these pages have no blanks. They have a lot of language because a lot of things have gone wrong before. We want to make sure we outline them properly. Who's the management firm? Who's the resident? Who's the owner? Where is it? What's the rent? And how often? And what's the term? And there's that ending term of the lease. How much is the security deposit? How much is it if your check bounces? Where is it going to be held? That tenant's money in the form of a TSD, tenant security deposit, got to tell them where we're keeping it. got to be this bank in an account that is labeled trust account. Summary ejectment. Our friend eviction, here's who's paying those fees, how much they are. There's a court appearance fee. There's maybe a second trial fee, a complaint filing fee. Who's allowed to be there? We better not come along and find out that you are the only one on the lease, but 10 of your close friends always live there, always sleep there. Termination provisions, renewal provisions. If in the event such written notice of termination is not given, the tenancy shall automatically become a period-to-period tenancy upon the same terms. It'll shift probably maybe to month. You see that a lot. More about the security deposit, the tenant's obligations. There it is. Let's look at these. These will look familiar because we saw an entire slide about this. What are they going to use it for? It better be residential, if indeed it is a residential property. Don't disturb other people. Don't be disruptive. Don't do it for unlawful or immoral purposes. Criminal activity, that falls on the tenant's shoulders if they let somebody in there who's behaving and engaging in criminal activity. Keep it clean and safe. Not limited to plumbing fixtures and appliances. No unsafe, unsanitary conditions. Throw your trash away, right? Housing and building codes. We saw that before. Dispose of things safely. Use things properly. Plumbing, heating, AC. Don't destroy things. Don't waste things. They've kind of spelled out the whole garbage and waste thing in 4 or 5 different places here, almost as if it's a recurring problem potentially between either or landlord or tenant. Responsible for damages, cost of utilities, not limited to water, sewer, electric. Who's paying those? Tenant's going to pay those. Conduct themselves in a reasonable manner. Oh, well, that's fun to go talk about what that is. Not abandon or vacate during the initial term. This kind of sets them up for proving in court that they need to be evicted or maybe need to pay the rent that's due. If they tried to move out 4 months early, they promised that they would not leave early, therefore they need to pay the extra 8 months or whatever they may be. Smoking, another big fat blank chunk to just add what needs to be added. And then the landlord's obligations, make repairs, building codes, keep things safe and clean, promptly repair facilities. If they don't promptly repair it, if they let it drag out, then that tenant has available to them constructive eviction. They can move out because it's not safe and stop paying the rent at that point. Outlining who the utilities are with, who's paying them, landlord or tenant. The smoke and carbon monoxide, landlord will provide them, give you the batteries up front. Tenant shall notify the landlord in writing of the need for replacement or repair to a smoke or alarm. Landlord shall do so within 15 days of receipt of notification. Landlord shall place new batteries in at the beginning, and the tenant shall replace them as needed during. Right of entry again. This one always is fun. When you're helping somebody sell a house that's an investment house, a rental house, you're dealing with the seller, but you're also dealing with the tenant. That tenant has nothing to gain, usually, from selling that property. It is not unheard of for the appointment center to call and say to the tenant, we have someone that wants to show it today between 4 and 5, and the tenant says, oh, no, I'm sorry, I can't allow that. Can't let that be shown. The tenant can sometimes be a block. So you need to have that discussion with your seller client. Look, in my experience, tenants need some motivation. Maybe you need to pay them to move out early. Maybe you need to make sure they're on the same page and they're going to cooperate because they could stand in the way of us getting the showings that are requested. which affects your bottom line. So it's nice to find out what kind of obstacles you as the broker are going to be facing when dealing with both owner and tenant. Landlord reserves the right to enter the premises during reasonable hours to inspect, make repairs, show it, and display for rent for sale signs. Doesn't mean they'll still do what they're supposed to do. But it's spelled out there so you can at least point back to it. Pets again, alterations. What can the tenant do? They won't paint, nails, screws, otherwise deface, blah, 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 without the landlord's prior written consent. And there's probably a list that you could provide and say, here's what you are allowed to do. Small nail holes are fine. Yeah, okay, you can paint it, but only one of these colors. Maybe they'll let them paint it a crazy color. Maybe it's got to be a beige or a gray. Okay. I'll include that in your Google Drive as well, so you can take a look. Next up, 17, we're going to talk about fair housing. Not a huge chapter, but an important one. Fair housing quite often shows up in our continuing education classes. Probably because people get it wrong, and we have to be reminded of how best to handle it. There we go. All right. Chapter 17, fair housing. We're going to look at the federal and state fair housing laws, how they are enforced, how they impact us as brokers. Classes of people, we kind of already touched on those, and the easy acronym to remember them by. And the purposes of the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as what is sexual harassment. Spoiler alert, property managers are not allowed to sexually harass the tenants. I'm sorry, we have to say that out loud. Purpose of civil rights laws affecting the real estate industry are to simply make it a fair marketplace where everybody of similar financial means has similar choices. You can discriminate on the basis of financial ability. If someone can't afford $2,000 rent, you don't have to rent it to them. But besides that, their protected class categories, if they've got the $2,000, should not matter. Should be about the money, right? This logo, the Equal Housing Opportunity logo, you've probably seen it 1,000 times, and you'll see it even more. I think I mentioned to you last time about the hate speech provision in the Realtor Code of Ethics. Just keep in mind, people can make a complaint completely unfounded. Turns out that the person wasn't deemed guilty, but they still had to go through the process of the investigation. They still had to basically stop their business, spend time gathering up their documents, their proof that they did things correctly. And sometimes the bad guys are revealed. Hopefully, that's the whole point, and we can get them corrected or removed altogether or disciplined. But sometimes they didn't do anything wrong, and it was someone made a complaint either because they didn't know the actual rules and laws or because they just wanted to cause trouble for that person. Or they were just flat out lied, and that person was able to prove, look, here's what I did. Here's the proof that I did it right. Right? So if you are the subject of an investigation, if things are not going your way, and then it is also discovered that you never used this logo in your marketing, the authorities investigating might just say, well, clearly this hasn't been enough of a priority for you. Maybe this is a clue or an indicator that you did indeed commit this crime or this rule infraction. So use the logo. Your firm is probably going to have some policy and procedures in place for that, but should be on your marketing. I have it at the bottom of my website. as a pretty big display. Put it on business cards, signs. Your firm's probably going to help you with that. Your BIC's probably going to say, yes, put that on there. There's a book called Fair Housing. It's not an option, it's the law, that spells this out. You can Google that and get a copy of that. It spells out the categories, and here they are. Okay, good. I was afraid my corn graphic went away. Here's the fresh corn acronym. You need to know these classes. You need to know who we are to protect. Who are we to make real estate equally accessible for? The words are fresh corn. The E in fresh and the O in corn stand for equal opportunity, but all the other letters are the 7 protected federal classes, federally protected classes, and that is familial status, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but the spoiler is kids under 18. Familial status is not who's married to who. It is, are there underage kids? So running an ad for a rental that says single occupants only, one person only, would be illegal, because you can't not rent to somebody because they have a kid, a dependent kid, right? Race, obviously. Race goes back the furthest, we'll see in the next slide, all the way back to the mid-1800s. That was where race started becoming something you could not discriminate against as per law, and it's carried on forth. Sex, handicap, color, religion, and national origin. Make real estate available. Work with people in these categories. Don't choose not to work with people because they are in these categories. It's the overarching theme here. It all started with race in the mid-1800s as an offshoot from the Civil War. The Federal Civil Rights Act of 1866 said, now from here forward, no one can be discriminated against on the basis of race. Now, they still were, and they still are, but it became a federal thing. It became a law. At least now, at that point, it became something that is on the books that could be pursued. Hopefully, we pursue it better now than we used to, and I think we do. But it applied to all property, real estate as well as personal property, no discriminating against people on the basis of race, no exemptions at all. Real and personal. So it wasn't specifically about real estate, but it encompassed it, right? Fast forward 100 years to the Federal Fair Housing Act of 1968. And now these 7 protected classes started being kind of put together, but it started with race back in 1800s. Then it turned into the specifically for housing. It started out with these 4. No discrimination about housing, about real estate on the basis of race, color, nationality, or religion. These were the first 4. Somebody wants to call and look at a house, and because of the way they speak, maybe an accent, someone chooses not to work with them for that reason. That's what we're talking about here. So 1968. So on the test, you'll need to be able to know which of these various phases of time brought on the different categories. And I think this one's probably kind of easy to think about, because obviously race, color, nationality started it all. And then religion as well. Can't discriminate on the basis of religion. Fast forward again to the mid-70s, and now those 4 plus this 5th. Can't discriminate against someone in the course of doing real estate based upon their gender, sex, man or woman at that point. Added in 1974, can't discriminate on the basis of sex or gender. This category has been modified. It's still there, but within it, in other words, those 7 protected classes, fresh corn didn't become fresh corn LGBTQ. We don't have other vegetables to put in there to allow for all of that. They put in the LGBTQ categories within sex, and they make a note of pointing that out. In 1988, 2 more were added, handicap and familial status. No discrimination against people in real estate who have kids or with disabilities. Sometimes you'll see people call it Fred's corn because they prefer the word disability to handicap. But 88 was handicap and familial status. I'm going to recap. 74 was sex, gender, and it started in 68. The Federal Fair Housing Act started in 68 with race, color, nationality, and religion. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act, that thing by which lenders must behave, has 3 protected classes that we don't. 3 more protected classes that aren't in the fair housing ones. Lenders have to also not discriminate against borrowers based on these things. Marital status. I'm not loaning you the money because you're single. Go get married, then I'll loan you the money. Can't discriminate on the basis of marital status. Can't discriminate on the basis of age. And if you think about it, I can see that may be tempting to someone who doesn't know any better. Right? A lender has a 98-year-old, my friend, the same one whose ceiling in their kitchen fell to the floor because of the water leak. Her grandmother lived to be, I think, 105. 105-year-old grandmother. She could have walked into the bank and said, I want to get a mortgage on a house, 30-year loan. And they can't say, wait a minute, 30 plus 105. No, not doing it. Not allowed. Illegal. Can't discriminate on the basis of age, partly too, because even if she were to die, it's still, in the estate would handle it. And then can't discriminate on the basis of whether that applicant for the loan receives public assistance. Do they seek or receive government help? Public assistance, you can't deny them because of that. So we're talking about housing again, right? Fair housing. Can't tell people that they can't live here because of the protected classes. Also, you can't charge them differently. Can't charge them a different interest rate or a larger down payment because of the protected classes within which they may be. Here's one that probably comes up the most. Don't know how catchable it is unless somebody gets caught by a tester. By the way, there are testers. When you're answering phone calls, when you're talking on the phone with potential clients, and they start asking maybe suspiciously pointed questions that the average consumer doesn't really know to that level of sophistication, you might be talking to a tester. Meaning HUD, Department of HUD, might be sending out, having people call various agents to see how well they handle them, see if they're violating fair housing on the phone. They would have somebody call that either admits or for some reason makes that agent being tested think that they are in a protected class. Then they would see how they behave with them, see how they treat it. Is it still available? Is the property still for sale? Is it still for rent? If that agent being tested says, oh, I'm sorry, it went under contract just this morning. And then 10 minutes later, the tester has another person call who sounds like another category. If that agent in question says, oh, yeah, it's still available, they find out some information about that caller, that they're in a different class and they're treated differently, that's the problem. Telling somebody it's already sold, already rented, when it's not, so as to manipulate who actually ends up renting it or buying it based on their protected class. So the Federal Fair Housing Act, we're talking about housing, residential. That means 1 to 4 units. When it's 5 or more units, it's considered commercial. So the Federal Fair Housing Act is talking about buildings designed for occupancy as a resident, 1 to 4 units. Familial status is this: children under 18, can't discriminate, can't refuse to sell or rent to somebody if they have kids under 18. What about, let's see, I'll talk about it in a minute. I think we'll get to it. But some of you may be thinking, what about those 55 and older communities? They're clearly saying nobody under 55. If they went into a community that was already established, that already had families with kids, they could not say from here forward, only people that are 55 and older. But that's why most of these 55 and older communities start out being 55 and older from day one. because they can. There's an exemption allowed. They're not violating anybody's rights because nobody's there yet. It's brand new. This is going to be a senior living center, 55 and older community, and it's an allowable exemption because that demographic, people who choose to live there, want to live there free of things that come in neighborhoods with kids. They're allowed to do so because it's not infringing on anybody's existing rights right now. So it's usually something being built, something that started and was always that way. It also, those 55 and older communities include other things that cater to the demographic. They make it convenient for them. They give them social activities. They might tend to be more easily accessible housing, single levels, good sidewalks, easy to walk, easy to roll, assisted devices on, accessible within the units. And it's also comes with a price tag, right? You kind of pay for the privilege. Those monthly conveniences come at higher, usually monthly HOAs and fees like that. Handicapping condition, something that affects a major life activity. That's what we're talking about, including rehabilitation efforts. Renting to somebody in a wheelchair. If you put up your property for rent, you can't deny somebody in the wheelchair if they need those doorways widened. What if it's an older property and your doorways don't accommodate a wheelchair, but you want to rent your property? Well, you can't deny renting to somebody just because that they need your doorways widened. Oh, so I got to pull out a chainsaw and widen the doorways? Yeah. At your own expense? No. That's where the line is drawn. Adjusting the accessibility is required, but not at your expense. The renter would pay for that, and the renter could also pay for it being restored to its pre-condition before they rented it. But you can't turn them down because of the disability. That's why you need to think hard about whether or not you want your property to be a rental, because it's got to fall under these guidelines. Are you going to really rent out that historic property with doorways that don't comply? 100-year-old property, you've got to widen doorways. Maybe that's something that's not a good rental option for you. In case that disabled tenant comes along, wants to apply, you can't say, no, I don't want your wheelchair here. It's really not built for that. You chose to rent it out. You've got to modify it. Otherwise, you could be sued. You could be guilty criminally of discriminating against somebody with a disability. So the landlord has to allow reasonable modifications. They can't increase the security deposit because of the disability or the equipment involved, but they could negotiate and say, well, okay, we will lower the counters. That's a thing. We will widen the doorways, but when you move out, you've got to pay for us to put everything back to the way it was before. Tenant pays for the modification. The landlord has to allow, the owner landlord has to allow the modifications. Some exemptions. These are fun. This is the part that kind of turns your head around a little bit. Okay. Treat everybody fairly. Treat everybody equally, regardless of their federally protected classes. However, there are some exemptions. On the left are United States, entire country, federal allowable exemptions. On the right are North Carolina allowable exemptions. And what applies when two different levels, like state versus local or federal versus state, what applies when one rule is stricter than the other? Who always wins? Who wins when a rule is stricter than another? Whatever it may be. Might be zoning. It's the stricter one. Regardless if the stricter one is local or state and the not stricter one is federal. So keep that in mind. Here it is. According to U.S. Federal Fair Housing, if you are an owner selling your own property, or an owner leasing your own property, for lease by owner, for sale by owner, you are allowed to discriminate. You are allowed to choose who can buy it based solely on a protected class category. However, to North Carolina's credit, that exemption does not exist. FSBOs, FLBOs are not allowed to discriminate. They can't say, I'm not renting to them because of this. So the U.S., yes, if it's your own property, but not North Carolina. And because everything we deal with our North Carolina license is in North Carolina, yay for us. Good job, North Carolina. No exemption of fair housing laws since you're going to be dealing in North Carolina. I'm sure there are some states that follow the federal and may still allow the handling it the way the federal does. I don't know which states those are. I'm sure we could all make some guesses, but we're not going to right now. Another federal issue is rental property. Let's say it's a duplex or a triplex, 2 or 3 or 4. Federally, if the owner occupies one of those units, they can choose not to rent the other units to people in protected classes if it's an owner who's in one of the units. However, on the state level, North Carolina level, it's the owner or a relative of the owner. If either the owner or a relative of the owner lives in one of the units, they are allowed to deny somebody the other unit rental based on protected classes. So, sorry, North Carolina, we need to fix that one too. Federally, private clubs can restrict. You can say this is a Mormon club. This is based on religion, right? This is a certain club for this protected class only, not those other ones. That's allowed if it's a private club. And then also religious organization. For the religious organization one, Baptist Association, Catholic, whatever it may be, they can't use that as an excuse to discriminate against the other protected classes. It better be because of the religion that you are restricting them. It can't be that, we're saying it's religion, but that way we keep so-and-so out too. So it must be about the religion that the club is restricting. And then on the state level of North Carolina, we are still allowed to have all male, all female dormitories. Student housing can be all one same sex, still allowable. That top one, any of them could be a test question, but just, I think you might have to just make the list. Don't forget, we made this point, I think, early in the course, but by now, hopefully you've been making lists of things, right? Lists of various categories, making charts to compare things like fee simple absolute versus fee simple defeasible. Well, this would be another one. Be able to maybe after class today, jot it down, see if you can remember and write down what those exemptions are, both federally but also state of North Carolina, and compare the two. But mainly a good testable question is both the private club and the religious clubs or organizations cannot use those exemptions to discriminate just freely against all protected classes, just the one about which their club is based. Oh, good time for a break. Let's come back and we'll talk about these 55 and older communities again, and I'll see you in 10. something else that comes up with fair housing in our business as brokers. You know, especially these last couple of years, been really competitive. Buyers have been looking for any leg up, any advantage they could possibly come up with to beat out all of the other offers. And some real estate genius coach way back in, I think, maybe the mid 90s, I don't know, maybe even gone back further than that, but I just became aware of it back then, were what are called buyer love letters. Anybody heard of the term buyer love letter? Yeah, it looks like this. I literally got one in the mail 2 weeks ago. My house is on the market, but I don't think it was because of that. I think they just do property searches and they saw that I've got some extra acres in the city limits. And so I get these from time to time, but not like this one. Hasn't been quite this like this before, but this is a classic buyer love letter. Even whether it's for an investment, an investor offering to buy it like this, or a buyer just using an agent, using financing to buy something. And they're trying to spell out, hey, you should sell to me, not them, because I'm great and I really love this property. And it's okay if they can stay away from violating fair housing, but very frequently they don't. They can't. They don't understand it. They either do it intentionally or they don't know how fine that line is, right? They talk about things that they should not be talking about. More importantly, here's what they did in the beginning stages of these letters: the picture. That is the major no-no. Do not put pictures, because now the implication is you should sell to me because of what I look like, because of my protected class. That's how buyer love letters got in trouble. That's how people using them got in trouble, right? In addition to the language in the letter, whether intentional or not, if you start talking about my wife and 3 kids, or maybe it's her writing the letter, my spouse and 3 kids. Okay, right off the bat, familial status. Hello. Love this property because it's in walking distance of the Jewish Community Center or the YMCA, the Young Men's Christian Association, right? Anytime those sorts of things are coming up, now you've got grounds for somebody to make a complaint. Now you've got a potential fair housing issue on your hands. So as a broker, you could put in what we see more frequently done now, because this is such a hot button issue, is just to put in the MLS, look, you can write your buyer love letter if you want, but we're not passing that on to the seller. We will only present the offer. We will not include the buyer love letter if that's something you make as part of your offer. And that's okay. It's allowable and it's suggested probably by your BIC, because we don't want to go here, right? I could call this guy. I could probably say, you know what? This may be a problem for you. I have a feeling, since he's an investor and not represented by an agent in any way, that he's probably going to not care my opinion on the matter and my attempt at helping him with this. But he might care if somebody makes a complaint, right? So that's the buyer love letter situation. Oops. 1 second here. When PowerPoint goes away. Here we go. We left off over here. Here we go. This 55 and older community thing is yet another allowable exemption. You can have communities that cater to 55 and older. Margie lives not in one like this, but one that is kind of talking about accessibility and convenience, but they're one of those that's trying to talk about a lifestyle community. If she comes back in a little bit, I'll see if she's got more to offer. Have you dealt with 55 and older buyers, sellers before, Margie?
Yeah, I have the SRES designation and
Right.
I teach that class. Um, I would say to you, be very, very careful. 55 and over is not assisted living. The houses do not have handbars. It's not like that at all. You can find that, but the average 55 plus communities that are being built around the country today are a lifestyle and a resort environment that people have worked hard to get to, and so they're there. But it's very different when you think about an assisted living versus nursing home, et cetera. You know, you go down the line, and folks, especially us baby boomers, we don't like it when you say, "Oh, you're an empty nester now." There's houses in my neighborhood that are 3,400 square feet, and they're the ones that sell the most. So be very careful because you can alienate somebody very, very fast.
Yours is not
We,
55 and older, though, is it?
it's 55
Is
plus.
it?
Yeah,
Thought it
55
was.
plus. And it isn't because we don't want to be around children, because all these people we have little grandchildren here all the time that we all love. It's just that you're not in that season and you just want to come and go as you please and not have to worry about younger people. So my advice to you is don't make assumptions ever and be very cautious if you have somebody that says, well, what about those 55 plus communities? You know, we don't want to be with a bunch of old farts. Well, let me tell you, where I live, we can't keep up with them. So be careful. That's my advice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Can you tell I'm passionate?
Do they, is yours 55, 62? What's the difference there?
Just 55 plus. And there is a difference, which I can't really remember at the moment, Neil, but there is a difference. But this is just one of you has to be 55.
Right.
So where we trilogy, the average age is 60. That's the average age. But Alan says when we moved in here, we bumped the average age up.
It's a lovely community. We had a company gathering there this past weekend, and gorgeous clubhouse. They always do it up really nice.
Yeah, it's meant to be resort living. And there are two or three others in the general area between, say, Lake Norman and Lake Wylie. It really will depend on what your clients want. Just be cautious and don't make assumptions. Don't assume they don't like children. Don't assume they need handbars or they don't. If they need handbars, they need to be in assisted living.
Um,
That's it.
what about your
Yeah.
neighborhood and its guest policy for under 55? I know you can have people over, but is there a limitation?
Oh, no, no, no. People have their grandkids. In the summer, some people took their grandkids for the whole summer because we
Oh,
have the gym and two pools and
right.
tennis courts and pickleball, you know. So, no, there is no limitation at
Okay.
all.
I think some might have, they just don't want it to be where somebody wiggles under a loophole and it's actually somebody there full time. So they might put some communities might actually maybe enforce it more than others. So that college age grandkid who's 25 can't just live there with grandparents forever and ever and ever. Um,
I suppose some are. Now ours isn't. Our neighbors across the street, when they bought their home, it was the two of them, and they were like, "Oh, it's just the two of us finally." And then within a year, all three of their children graduated from different universities, couldn't get a job, and they all three moved back in.
wow.
And they're all in their mid-20s, and there's no fuss about that. And we
Interesting.
all love them. So it depends on the facility. And so that's why when you're working with buyers, you've got to be so careful. What do you want? Here's the CCNRs. Let's read them. Well, we have 3 dogs and they're our best friends. Okay, well, can you have 3 dogs? So in our community, there is no limit to how many dogs you can have, but we definitely have a problem with barking dogs. And so that'll be taken care of by the HOA. But I do think that that's a good point, Neil. There are various rules in various communities. And if you're working with a buyer that wants this type of community, you better make sure that they have the CCNRs in their hands. And then what I always did when I gave that to anyone was on every page I made myself a stamp and it said, I have read and understood this information.
Wow.
And
That's
then
good.
a little line for their name and a line for the date. And I stamped every single page of the CCNRs, bylaws, whatever you want to call them. And then I kept a copy of that.
That's good.
Always cover your
Smart.
bases.
Yes. Cover those assets. Thank you very much, guest speaker, co-teacher.
I just love it.
Okay. Who do we complain to if we think there has been a problem? If we think there's been a violation? On the state level, the North Carolina Human Relations Council is who handles it. You would report to them. In fact, on the Real Estate Commission website, I think it's still there. It was there last year when we taught assistance animals versus service animals, and they have the links to these various agencies that you would complain to. So the North Carolina Human Relations Council for any state of North Carolina violations, if it's a federal one, that's going to be through HUD, a department within HUD called the Office of Equal Opportunity. You'd look up HUD, OEO. There's a link, there's a phone number, either way that you can make a complaint about. Some terms that you need to know, definitions of blockbusting versus steering versus redlining. With blockbusting, what's happening is a broker, a big, bad, mean, terrible broker is trying to scare a seller into selling by threatening them based on fair housing categories. With steering, it's a buyer that is being manipulated. So, what is blockbusting? Hey, you better list your house and sell it. Let me get it sold before more of them get over here. They are coming. A lot more of them are coming this way, whatever them are, within the whatever class that is. That's blockbusting. You're breaking up. You're busting up the block. You're trying to get sellers to sell, scaring them or making them concerned because of their preconceived notions or prejudice toward groups, and you're using that. That is illegal. It's called blockbusting. Steering, maybe it's a little easier to remember because I think of like putting a buyer in your car. We used to do that and drive them around to show things. Now I think more frequently everybody meets at the various properties, but you drive them, you steer them around to look at the properties, and you're steering them to certain neighborhoods because you think this client should live over here with them, people like them, or you're steering them away from certain areas. So steering is about the buyer. Blockbusting is about the seller. Keep in mind, though, sometimes when it comes to steering, sometimes they try to steer themselves. I've had somebody tell me that I want to live around people like me. What neighborhoods have this kind of people like me in it? It might have been a religion thing. It was one of them was a race thing. She said, where do the black families live? Another was a religious family. Where do the Muslims live? And so I have no doubt in my mind that either of those parties were trying to be malicious or trying to be mean in any way. For whatever reason, they wanted to live around people like themselves. Not because they were scared of others, but because of a comfort thing. Maybe. I have no idea. But I have the same responsibility as if I would have been faced with a raging, bigoted person who said, I never would want to live next to such and such. Same thing for our purposes. We have to explain it to them either way and say, look, guys, I can't give you advice on that. Even if it's just somebody who just feels more comfortable living around people like themselves because of whatever. even if it sounds innocent, still illegal. Still something that could lose your license, still something that could cost you 3 times the typical damages, treble the fines when it's a fair housing violation. You have to be the arbiter of what is legal. Say, here's how this works. You have to follow their lawful, not any, but lawful instruction. Sorry, guys, I may not be the one for you. If you want me to only show you properties in neighborhoods that have this or aren't composed of this, first of all, how could you possibly know, really? But secondly, do I want to align myself with this person? Let's figure this out and explain this bold print in the agency agreements in the very beginning. Maybe we can get them to admit their prejudices up front so that we don't have to spend a bunch of our time before we get to a point where, gosh, I got 40 hours in them and now I find out that this is a thing and I've got to walk away from it. No fun. So
Hey,
you've got to
Neil.
educate them. Yes.
So that kind of happened. We were in a model home, and the person who was in there prior to us, he asked the agent, he said, "Are there a lot of kids in this neighborhood?" So the agent didn't, he scooted around it, but how he got around it, he said, "I can't tell you that." He said, "But if you come back in the afternoon when the school bus pulls up, that's all I can say." I said, "Okay, that was very clever."
Well, it sounds clever. And I can appreciate that he was trying. However, if it all came sideways, went sideways, and things got weird, the commission has said, let's not do that either. And we as brokers who are faced with this, if somebody says, who lives in this neighborhood? What kind of people? I've heard it in CE classes when I had to teach this, I think just last year it came up because again, almost every year, some aspect of fair housing comes up because it's a recurring problem. Some will say with quite a lot of confidence in the chat, or they'll speak up and they'll say, well, I just tell them to come back on Saturday or come at nighttime, see who's out playing. No, we're not allowed to do that either. And you pretty much just have to dismiss yourself from the topic altogether. Look, guys, I am not allowed to give you advice in that arena. First of all, I probably don't even know. Secondly, even if I did, I couldn't tell you it's a violation of fair housing laws. And just that's it. If they push, then again, that might be a good reason to stop working with them so that you're not put into an even more awkward and now license threatening or criminal offense threatening situation later. Wow. Yeah. I'm sure it happens a lot. And that one is probably, that familial status one is probably the one that happens, I'm just going to guess, with the least malicious intent. It sounds so innocent. Well, I want my kids to have other kids to play with. What's wrong with that? It's just, it is what it is. You've got to follow the laws and rules. And I can't give you advice on who lives where. And don't even tell them to come back and look on their own time or follow the school bus. Stay out of it. You stay out of it. As a broker who's been in it the longest, I interview those brokers. I ask about it in CE, who's been in it the longest. The ones who make it the longest are the ones who have the best things like what Margie just said to eliminate the liability from our shoulders. Having a stamp made, having them initial the bottoms of each page of a covenant and restriction, that could be 20 or 40, 50 pages. But in the event next year that somebody decides to claim that Margie didn't tell them of something, and she can pull out a page and say, well, you signed that you read it right here, right? That's worth its weight in gold in those moments. So just stay out of the discussion altogether. I would say that on-site sales rep, hopefully he knows better now, but so many of them don't. That's why it keeps becoming covered. That's why it's always in CE classes. So just be super careful. That is the key. And the ultimate goal, again, not being a block for somebody having access to housing on a fair level, fair basis. But again, to reiterate the point, that last point, don't let them, the little old lady who just wanted to live around more people in her same race category, I didn't take offense to her request. Not the same way I would have, I don't know, right or wrong. Somebody who has certain kind of flag or certain kind of feelings, and they think that I look like them, therefore I have their same prejudices. And so they start winking me and be like, oh, wait, who lives here? I don't want to be. I didn't take it that way at all with this little old lady. I just thought that she wanted a certain comfort level, but I had to have the same conversation with her, right? I didn't fire her. I would have fired him. I would have backed out working with that guy, but I didn't have a problem with her. But still, you do need to educate them. Look, I wish I could help you with that. I'm not allowed to. It is what's considered a federal fair housing violation. You're going to have to get that information for yourself in some other way. Can't be through me. I'll give you real estate advice. I'll tell you what it's worth because of the market values and the comparables, but not who lives where. Redlining applies to lenders. Back in the day, once upon a time, maybe even now, hopefully not, but the idea is a map hanging on the wall, and the lender would draw a red line around that part of town where certain people live and not make loans in that part of town. So redlining, drawing a red line around certain areas, not making loans based on protected classes in certain areas. So a redlining thing is a lender being the bad guy. A steering thing is a broker being the bad guy and manipulating buyers. Blockbusting is a broker being a bad guy and manipulating sellers.
Neil, may I add one
Yes,
thing?
please.
Frequently, brokers that use the terminology that Neil was sharing with you, it's because they're so afraid of losing the client. Then instead of just saying, I can't discuss that with you, they waffle or they come up with what they think is clever things. And the fact is, if someone says to you, I only want to live with people, around people that look like me, and don't tell anybody, or those kinds of things, is that someone that you really want to work with? And I think that's what you have to keep in mind. And once you dip your toe in the waters of discrimination, the ripples are incredible. Well, that was good, wasn't it, Neil? That was really good.
Might put that on the website.
But the ripples are incredible, because sometimes what you think is, oh, well, that's not so bad, or, well, yeah, maybe I've done that once or twice. But in our business, you cannot participate. You absolutely cannot participate. When we first moved to Charlotte 30 years ago, we I worked with Coldwell Banker in California, so I got an agent here from Coldwell Banker to help us. And we could have really afforded more, but we had a budget that we wanted to stick to. And so I don't think I told you this, but anyway, so we were driving around. We drove past Morrowcroft, a really fancy gated community, and it looked really pretty. And so I just said, oh, can we look in there? And she pulled the car over and she stopped and she turned around. We were in the back seat and she said, you can't afford that. Well, Mr. Bell was very insulted because we could have afforded anything if we wanted to. We just didn't want to. And she was very rude. So we basically just had her pull over. We got out of the car and we walked around and said goodbye. So, you have to know your people, know what you're saying. Don't play the game. Don't play the game. Thank you.
You're welcome. It can be tempting the closer they are to you, friends, relatives. But don't forget on those phone calls, though, those testers. Last year's CE talked about a Long Island case. In Long Island, they did a testing, sort of a sting. They called tons and tons of agents, and they found a ton of violations. It was that whole thing where they have one tester call an agent, pretend to be a certain demographic, another tester call and pretend to be a different demographic, and see how that agent handled it. If they claimed the property wasn't available for rent or lease or sale or whatever, that could be a problem. If they handled it, treated them differently in any way, that's what they were looking for. And they found a lot of it. It was rampant in that one particular case. Another easy place to screw this thing up for a broker is with the advertising. Obviously, you're not going to advertise blatantly, this is not for this group of people, but there's a lot of wiggle room in there where some agent is trying so hard to point out the benefits of a property that they overstep and forget to talk about just the property, and they start talking about the people. It needs to be about the property. Don't talk about the people that might want to buy the property so much. If you say, oh, this is a cute little bungalow around the corner from the Jewish Community Center, that's a problem. You could say community center, but by saying Jewish Community Center, there could be an implication that only Jewish people should buy this property, right? So that's part of the broker in charge responsibility. The broker's what is it when it's possessive? That's part of the responsibility of the broker in charge, is to make sure those advertising blurbs are done properly and they're not violating fair housing. Oh, you definitely have. Absolutely. No doubt that you see it a lot, for sure. And that's why we're talking about it. And that's why it shows up in the CE classes. Yeah, no question. Agents screw this up all the time. and when all you have to do is type out a real quick post, where's that thing? Take a picture of your cute little new listing and send that post, and now it's on Instagram. Hopefully your firm has something in place where you're not allowed to do that, or not until you've proven that you know what you're doing. Because I had a guy that I knew, sort of an acquaintance, not so much a friend, who got in the business. And this wasn't fair housing, but he wrote the little Facebook post and didn't include his broker information. He made it sound like it was just a seller selling his own property. And so I reached out and I had to weigh it. I'm like, do I want to be the know-it-all jerk, or can I be the attempted friendly, not jerk, but still know-it-all? I just didn't want somebody who might turn him in to go to him first. And I said, you got to put your brokerage stuff on there too. But I see the fair housing stuff flirting with it all the time. Any reference to great for kids is a problem, for instance. So language, images, if you use images, and I love to use images, I find it as a consumer very engaging to see people enjoying stuff, whatever it is. Parks, products, guitars, cars, cities, lifestyles. I like seeing people laughing. That's just a useful method. But make sure as a broker running those sorts of ads and posts that you are varying it, that you're switching it up. Be conscientious about who you show using and enjoying. Don't let it just be people looking like you, right? It's okay to use the images, but make sure those images reflect that you are open to diversity. Denying membership, denying services in brokerage, obviously prohibited. Appraisers appraising property and giving it a discount, giving it a strike in terms of dollar value because of who lives there, because of what part of town it's in, because of who's around. It needs to be based on the property track record, not the people there. Here's what the language looks like. In fair housing, you can say good neighborhood. You would not say no such and such people, right? You could say bachelor apartment. You can't say female only. You can look up fair housing advertising language, find some resources online that show you other examples of language that's allowable. Walk to shopping is okay, but to say able-bodied tenants only would be a problem. Family room is acceptable, but adults only would be a familial status violation. That would not be allowed. Sometimes it's kind of hard to decipher. It's kind of hard to see, why is this one okay, but that one is not? Let me check out the book here. I don't see very many examples of language in the book off the top of my head, but there are some in a document that I'm I just can't, I don't have it at hand, but I'll share it with you at some point. I'll probably put it in Notion about language. Obviously, the MLS, you want to get that right. You want to get everything right, but the MLS has got a lot more eyes that are educated at this. And so you'll get dinged. In fact, the MLS itself has robots, I like to call them, that scan your verbiage. It's not necessarily humans. They have certain words that they put into their system. And sometimes you get dinged for a fair housing violation. And it turns out it wasn't a violation, but they said, oh, this is a trouble word. This might be an indicator. I've gotten a couple flags, but it turned out whatever it was wasn't. They thought it was going to be bad, but it was an okay use of the word. Like family room, or single, the word single. If I was talking about a single occupant, single buyer, that'd be a problem. But if I was talking about a single car garage, that's okay. It's okay to sell houses that only have a one garage. So the words can trigger things in MLS. HUD oversees this stuff on the federal level. So you've got to comply, and you've got to make sure that you can pay penalties for getting this stuff wrong.
Neil,
Yes.
so it's funny you say that. My daughter, the one who's about to buy a house, she phoned me last night and she said, Mom, guess what? She said the house that I put an offer in on, she said they got the acreage wrong. She said he pulled up the wrong MLS. He pulled up the property next door, which was 0.60 of an acre. The offer that she put in on this property is actually 4.6 acres.
4.6?
Yeah, so her realtor said, you're probably going to have some equity in this house if you get it, because the listing was wrong. Everything was wrong. So we'll see.
Terrible. Great
That's
for
crazy.
her. Yeah. Good gracious. That's terrifying.
So what happened to the listing agent
So
for getting that wrong?
the house that she's wanting to make an offer on really has 4+ acres, and they said it had 0.6.
Right.
Wow. Well, let's see. When they put it in to the system as 0.6 for the price, the question is, did they price it? Was that just an input error? Did they really know it has 4, and did they price it as if it had 4? Then
no, they really didn't know that
Wow.
it had 4.6.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that seller is going to have something to say about it. And that listing agent and her firm, her BIC, was she provisional or non-provisional? That's part of it. That BIC may be more into the mess than otherwise. I would predict a complaint to the commission. They could be sued civilly, right? Because they cost money. The commission would potentially discipline for not using reasonable skill and care. It's pretty basic to verify acreage. Should be able to get that right. One part of that I suspect might be an issue is if the agent relied on anything other than a survey or the official tax record with even the tax record's not ideal, but there are other tax resources we can use. There's one called Realist, which is a company that pulls the tax data from each individual county's tax record data, and they report it. Well, anytime a robot is pulling from one into the other, if the wires get crossed, if the fields get crossed, it could report incorrect acreage. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's because that agent relied on one of those other kind of tax reporting websites than the official one. How could all of that been avoided? Well, a survey. The seller could say, you know what, this place is old. I don't know what I have. Let's just get it surveyed. At the very least, the agent should have said, how many acres is it? And if they were relying on an incorrect website from tax data as to acreage, that could be a problem. They probably should have given advice to, if there was any question, and how about walk it? How about put your boots on and walk the property, and you can tell real quick, are we talking about a 1/2 acre or 4.5 acres? Clearly, nobody walked the property. You can tell the difference there. It's not like 0.6 or 0.7. So it's going to fall on the agent.
Yeah, because Courtney went to see it. That was her second time going. And she said, Mom, I don't know that it really only has 0.60 of an acre. She said, That's on a lot of land.
Weird.
So she'll find out by 5 p.m.
You
today.
know, that's a potential byproduct of a lot of agents in the business who are fighting and focusing on the wrong things. They're focusing on the next transaction. They're not focusing on taking care of the one that's in their face, in their hands right now. Right? She just needs to hurry up and get this one closed so she can make money. And let me go ahead and find the next one, but not take a breath, take a moment to do things right and thoroughly the first time. I think a lot of times agents don't give it enough time. You know, you're always balancing lead generation with actual real estate. And that is the struggle for brand new agents, right? You get really good at lead generation because that's all you have to do. In the beginning, you have nobody to do anything for. You're trying to learn the business, but you have no business to do. So you get good at finding the business. You find one, and then you do all of that stuff, and the lead gen drops off. Then you get that closed, and you got to bring the lead gen back up. Some agents are just so plugged into one side versus the other that they neglect the other aspects of the business. He's still in the business, actually. His name's Tracy Gentry, and he's been in it a long time. He was a sales guy in another industry before real estate, and he was so successful at that industry that they kept carving up his territory. And he got tired of working hard, building up a territory only to lose income because they gave part of it to someone else because he kept growing it so well. And he said, where can I go where my sales efforts aren't taken away from me? And he got into real estate. And he told me, because I was at his firm at one point, we were in the same firm. He said, you know what? When you get a buyer client, you stick to them like glue until they buy something. He wasn't saying give them a constant sales pitch. He was saying, don't neglect them. Don't let them go. Do it right. Do it thoroughly. Make them a fan forever so that they do call you next time they need to do something. Because that buyer you help today is a seller that you can help next year, next 2 years, 3 years, 7, who will then also probably be a buyer also. I've got some repeat customers. I'm sure Margie does too. I've got some 10 and 11 and 12 times over repeat customers. That's what you want. I would like more, but I also have some 2s and 3s and 4s and 5s. Some are just one and done, but you want to make sure you do it so that your early efforts in this business come back to you later because they were so pleased with how you did it now. That listing agent's probably not getting anything again from that seller.
One other thing, she didn't like the whole due diligence money thing.
Mm-hmm.
So she's buying a house in Tennessee because they don't have due diligence.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's one way to solve the problem. So she was thinking North Carolina or Tennessee. So is it right there in the mountains, I guess?
Well, because she's a professor at App State, and so she lives in Boone, and she was trying to buy a house in Boone, but she couldn't find one. So she went outside of Boone, and her real estate agent said, well, broker said, well, you know, there's no due diligence fee in Tennessee. She said, so that's where I'm buying my house.
Wow. How far is that of a commute?
It's only actually going to be 35 minutes.
Brilliant. That's genius. Good for her. And that goes back to the broker as well. Good job on that broker thinking, how can I hurry up and get a sale? No, but thinking, how do I need to accomplish the goals of this client? She has a real problem with due diligence fee. I'm licensed in Tennessee as well, or maybe that broker referred her to a Tennessee agent. Put the client first, right? Instead of the paycheck. Though it's relationship over transaction. Anytime agents get nickel and dimed, start getting caught up in what will it take to get this thing closed so I can get paid and get out of here, that's when problems happen.
Yeah, he's been really patient with her.
Nice.
He's really good.
And look, he found her extra 4 acres. Brilliant.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, here is an important caveat. And let me see here. I'll show you something. In the book, we're on 574. I need to correct that page number on the slide. Under exemptions, none of the exemptions are allowed if a broker is involved. only time an exemption might be allowed is if there's no broker in sight. But if a broker is now involved, we know the rules and laws. Therefore, neither we nor our client can get away with not following them, even in using an exemption. If discriminatory advertising has been used, or if a real estate broker is involved, no discrimination allowed, period. Which also follows suit that, I shared it on the screen, but I didn't share it on the monitor. There we go. That's what I don't know if I showed it to you or not. There it is. Discriminatory advertising or broker involved. And then obviously if it is our own property, we're selling our own property by owner, because we are a broker, can't do it. Can't violate fair housing, because you know all the rules and laws, and we as brokers are held to a higher standard, right? So if a broker is there are no exemptions allowed, even in our own personal transactions. Be a violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. Sexual harassment, not allowed. No bullying, no sexual harassment of a tenant by the landlord or the agents of the landlord. That includes verbal, physical, or nonverbal. No sexual harassment allowed. ADA. When it comes to employment, people employed, got to give those employees equal access. Commercial, if it's a commercial facility, ADA is going to be involved. You have to comply with their requirements. If it's a place of public accommodation. And in the case of a real estate firm, ADA is sort of a double-edged sword there. It applies for selling and purchasing and leasing of commercial facilities. The offices that you're operating within must be ADA compliant, because you've got people, the public, accessing it, public accommodation. And if it's a firm with 15 or more employees, got to have certain accessibility in place for them. There's a post office in Cary, apparently. I've never seen it, heard of it. But it's like one of those old stone buildings. It's got like 25 steps to get up to it. So if you have a post office box in that post office and you are in a wheelchair, there is no ramp. It is not physically possible to put in a ramp. So instead of adjusting the accommodations because they can't put in a ramp, they have to adjust the way they handle it, their procedure. If you can't adjust the accommodations, you have to adjust the procedure. So someone who needs help, who can't access the building, can pull up to a certain spot, honk the horn, and a postal employee will come out, get their key, empty the box, and bring it to them. So they've modified and adapted in that way to give equal access to the disabled. The National Association of Realtors Code of Ethics is adhered to by us as realtors, and 1913 is when it was established. If you have that Realtor R, it shows that you're willing and you're required to adhere to a higher standard. The Real Estate Commission laws and rules that we're learning for you to pass this test are about protecting the consumer. These are too, in addition to not abusing your fellow agents, and it's a whole other level. It's a higher level. So we saw the 7 protected classes under Fresh Corn, but we also saw in that property management agreement, which is also reflected in the other agency agreements, not just 7. It's 9. It's the 7 of Fresh Corn plus sexual orientation and gender identity. NAR added those protected classes a few years ago. So again, we're making real estate accessible and fair to everybody, regardless of their membership or, I guess, categories that they're a part of, including these two as well. I'll do a little pop quiz, wrap this chapter up. Failure to comply with fair housing laws is both a civil and criminal violation, in addition to being grounds for disciplinary action from the Real Estate Commission. True or false? Have more participation. Hear from everybody here. Good job. You bet. In fact, it goes beyond that. The client could be guilty of the agent's actions. If the agent doesn't know what they're doing with fair housing, the client for whom they are working could also be found guilty. We are responsible for each other, agent and client. Good thing to point out to a client, right? Good thing for clients to know. Might even be a good thing to put out to the universe in form of content. Once you get to the point where you're putting out videos and content on your social media, make sure people understand this. You hire somebody good. If you hire somebody that doesn't know what they're doing about fair housing, you could end up in trouble, right? Licensees who work in areas where there are few minorities shouldn't worry because they won't normally have a problem complying with fair housing laws. True or false? In fact, they could have even more of a problem since they're not used to it, right? Since there are less occurrences to keep them sharp, keep them aware of compliance issues. We have CE classes that we teach, and we can tell certain areas, maybe certain types of brokers in terms of who knows what. Sometimes we get more wrong answers than others. It's interesting to see what the room of CE students gets right and wrong. And the ones who might be more homogeneous, similar to each other in certain areas in which they live, they might not be used to the rules and laws because they don't really have to be on a regular basis. HUD testers, somebody calling around, testing you, have to answer truthfully. If you say, "Are you a tester?" If you try to call them out while they're testing you, do they have to admit it? There are CE students who get this wrong all the time. And I think it's because of TV. They watch too much NYPD Blue, too many, boy, that's an old reference, too many old cop shows that say, "Oh, are you a cop? You have to tell me if you're a cop." I don't know if that's true or not, but this is not true. HUD testers do not have to reveal that they are indeed testing because that sort of defeats the purpose. They do not have to reveal themselves. They can be professional liars. That's what they're doing for a good purpose, for a good cause. A real estate licensee cannot be held liable for the discriminatory actions of the owner. The licensee must follow all orders of the client. True or false? Agent and principal are considered one. They are both guilty of the actions of the other. Doesn't that just kind of put a chill down your spine to think about some turkey doing it wrong could get you in trouble? Whether you're the broker or you're the client, you better make sure you align yourself with good people who do things right. That agent does need to follow the orders of the client, but only the lawful ones, not just any orders of the client. Don't sell my house to anybody in this class. I don't want such and such kind of person living here. I had one like that, but it was about religion. It was an old school gentleman who was hardcore in his particular religion, and he was selling like 10 acres. And there was like a certain other kind of religion that wanted to buy it and use it for their purposes, and to set up sort of a campus. And he had a problem with that because he didn't agree with their chosen kind. It was more than just like Baptist and Presbyterian. It was bigger differences than that, but it doesn't matter, right? Good question, Jennifer. And we sum that up with the last slide here in just a minute. What if you don't want to work with a client? Oh, well, that is discriminatory. Sorry, I was reading that a little differently. If you don't want to work with them, what do you mean? More specifically, do you fire them, or how do you fire them? What are you asking?
Yes, if you start working with them, they seem fine, and then the longer you're with them, you realize,
Yeah.
I don't want to show this person anything else, or I
Right.
don't want to work with. Can you decide not to do that?
Sure.
If you sign?
Absolutely. You could say, "You know what, guys, I don't think we are right for each other. I think you might be better served by a different broker. I'm probably not the broker for you." Something like that, or however direct you want to be. John Sylvia would probably be more direct than that, but case by case, depending on your relationship with them, yes, you can excuse yourself from the relationship. Yeah.
Yeah, and what if you are under
Oh boy,
contract with somebody already, and then you decide you don't,
I know. And
if
then
something crazy
I
came
know,
up?
I know. Well, at that point, now other people are involved. Now there's another party on the other side of the fence. You want to be on record as giving them proper advice, right? You can't comply with their orders to be discriminatory, but do you go through with the sale? Well, now you've got another entity on the other side. If it's something that affects them, obviously stop everything, talk to your BIC, see how they want to proceed. They might need to consult the firm attorney to see where on the legal spectrum this thing falls and how much liability you guys are under. But that's tough. That's why you need to get this right early to avoid not finding out you're in the situation until you're at that level. That'd be tough. Thankfully, you're not tested to that level here. Obviously, easy answer before you get under contract is agree to disagree and walk away. But once you're under contract, if it's something where you feel threatened, you could certainly talk to your BIC. They might assign it to a different broker. Maybe your BIC would take over. Maybe the BIC should step in and say, here, this thing happened. My agent reported that you and them had a conversation and they were unhappy or alarmed by the language. Therefore, just need to let you know and reiterate, we don't do that here. From now on, you'll be dealing with me. That might be a thing. The BIC might protect their agent by not making the agent be in the awkward situation anymore. So yeah, it's rough. That's when that BIC is earning their money. That's when you really are glad that you picked a good one, a firm with a good one. So pick a firm with a good one. Make sure that you do your homework and not only hear the promises they're making you, they know what you want. They know you want training, but do your very best to listen to that little small voice in your head. Are they really going to back you up in these? Maybe this is something you ask them. Maybe you say, you know what? A friend of mine ran into this situation. I'm just curious, how would you handle this? And just sit back, be quiet, and see how they answer it. Number one, if they're terrible at this, they'll hem and haw and stutter and not have a good answer. Number two, they might respect you more for caring about it and like you all the more, right? A BIC can be held liable for an agent's actions even if the broker was unaware of the discriminatory event. A BIC can be held liable for the agent's actions even if the broker was unaware of the discriminatory event. Yeah. It ain't easy being BIC. You've got to make sure that you're willing to deal with all of the other kinds of stuff. That BIC is the head of the firm. That BIC is liable for all actions of the licensees associated with the firm, more so with the provisionals, but still for the non-provisionals. Written policies need to be in place so that BIC can say, well, we told them not to do it this way, right? The BIC needs to shed liability too, but still make sure everybody's trained up. And that BIC, if there's somebody that they can finally realize, this guy, he's got a problem. He's got a deep-seated problem maybe from somewhere down in his past, and he just can't get past these kinds of fair housing things keep coming up with them. Maybe we need to part ways. You may not be a good match for the values that our firm wishes to share. Otherwise, it could lead to all kinds of additional problems. Housing providers can charge families with children a larger security deposit because of the increased possibility of damage for wear and tear. Those kids might tear things up. Crayon marks are more than ordinary wear and tear, and kids use crayons, so therefore, no kids. That's right. False. That would be a familial status violation. It's just part of it. Would be handled with the tenant security deposit. You can't charge more than the certain amounts based on the term of the lease. When we come back from break, we'll finish up this and we'll move on to that next chapter. See you in 10. We are back. Best break ever. Because this time I won't forget to dismiss you in an hour.
Neil, you're muted.
Again? Oh, I'm a rookie. Sorry. Just talking about how I won't forget to dismiss you in an hour. Like last time. Speaking of fair housing and language and all that fun stuff, there's a resource available through HUD called Part 109 Fair Housing Advertising. And it talks about all that fun stuff and then what some terms are and then words. Use of words, phrases, visual aids, what to avoid, what you're not allowed to use. Let's see. And the logo. It's not part of your course curriculum, but it does kind of mirror what we've been talking about. So I'll put that in the Google Drive. Let's finish up with our little fair housing pop quiz here. The next door neighbor to your listing is a group home for mentally challenged teenagers. This is a material fact and must be disclosed. True or false? Group home for mentally challenged teenagers. Got to tell everybody. Got to tell the whole world. Material fact. Not just that it's not a material fact, but it's a protected class. Mentally challenged. Can't talk about it. Protected class under handicap. Not presenting an offer from a minority is okay. If there's already a pending offer on the listing, you know what? We're already under contract. We did get an offer in. Happens to be a minority. I'm not going to show it because they already sold it. I'm off the hook. Of course, that's wrong. We have to present all offers, even when our listing is under contract, because our seller might want to take that as a backup offer if that buyer is willing to do so. So this would be a fair housing violation and a license law violation. Now you've got two entities on your tail. Housing provider must act with discriminatory intent before he can be held liable under the Fair Housing Act. Didn't mean to do it. Must act with discriminatory intent before being held liable. True or false? What they mean to do. That's actually false. What they meant is irrelevant. If the actions were perceived by a member of a protected class to be discriminatory, they could be held liable. That's the level at which we need to handle this topic. Extreme care diligence. Got to know it. Got to know our stuff here. Yes.
Can you explain that just a little differently?
Yeah. So if in the investigation that housing provider were to have said, "Oh, I didn't mean to do it. It wasn't my intent. I'm sorry that it came across this way, but it was." I'm trying to think of a good example. I can't off the top of my head, but I'll try to come up with one for you. But it'd be that sort of a thing. If their excuse was they didn't mean to, they're sorry that they did it wrong, but they didn't mean it. They didn't mean it in their heart, right? What they intended is irrelevant. It's what was perceived. So let me try to come up with an actual case study or something that'll.
I got it. I kind of read that.
That make a
wrong.
little.
Thank
Oh, okay.
you.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Local or state laws that conflict with federal fair housing laws take precedence. True or false? There's a conflict between the levels. What takes precedence? We know that already. You guys know that. Stricter takes precedence. Doesn't matter whose law it is. Local, state, federal, the stricter one wins. For sale by owners are not governed by federal or North Carolina fair housing laws. They may discriminate as long as a broker is not involved. If they're selling by owner, they can choose not to sell to somebody in a protected class. True or false? Not both. One of them is true, but not them both, right? It is true that federal laws allow them to discriminate, but state laws do not. North Carolina law does not. That's why you need to know both and know those exemptions. So make sure you're clear when you're reading these test questions. Are they talking about a North Carolina law or a federal law, right? Cough drop time. So in this case, North Carolina laws do not allow for sale by owners to discriminate, but the federal laws do. If they were in one of those states that did not have a conflicting state law, then they'd be all right. If the state law reflected the federal law and allowed a for sale by owner to not sell to somebody with kids, nobody would have a problem. But in North Carolina, they are not allowed to discriminate. Licensees charged with violating fair housing laws may be found guilty if they fail to prove that they did not discriminate. Fail to prove. You know what this sounds like? Guilty until proven innocent, right? The opposite of the legal system, and that is the way it is. Innocent until proven guilty is not the way it is with this stuff. You've got to prove that you didn't do the thing, right? What's your alibi? Did you do it or not? Somebody tells you they have a budget. Let's just for fun say, I want to buy $1 million house because that's more tempting. What's 3% of $1 million? $30,000 for that one. What's your split with your firm? Doesn't matter. It's still $30,000 you're splitting, right? You're getting something that's going to make you happy. What if that client says, can you tell me how many so-and-so live in this neighborhood? What's your best answer there? What's the best answer for something like that? I like it. You guys are keeping it simple. No. Now, shut up and sign the contract. Yeah, there we go. Let's elaborate. Let's give them, what if they're not happy with no? But why not? A good standard answer. Good safe answer. There it is. It was looking good. There you go, Danita. Great. Federal and state fair housing laws prohibit me from discussing that with you. I'm a broker who complies with laws and rules because you could get in trouble if I don't. I don't want my clients getting in trouble from something that I did. Plus, I happen to agree that everybody should have a fair shot at housing. Therefore, we can't talk about that. I'll be glad to give you real estate advice. I'll tell you what things are worth or what they probably should sell for based on similar ones that have sold. I'll give you an idea of, I'll do all the research in the world to find out what the rules are for covenants and restrictions and zoning. But this is where the line is drawn. When it comes to people, can't get into that. Who lives where? Can't talk to you about that. You'd have to get those answers from somewhere else, not me. Is that going to be a problem? Pause, be quiet, see how they answer. Oh, well, no, of course, I'm not like that. I have lots of so-and-so friends. Are you sure it's going to be a problem? No. What about this one, though? Can you refuse to work with someone for reasons other than those covered by fair housing laws? Can you turn down somebody? I like to say that there is no J in fresh corn. It is okay to discriminate against jerks, right? Jerks are not allowed. We don't want to work with the jerks. Therefore, sure, if it's a jerk, even if it's a jerk who is in a protected class, long as the reason you're not working with them is because of the jerk thing and not because of the class part, right? There are jerks of all sizes and makes and origins and beliefs and this and that and the other. But make sure it is very clear that you're not working with them for a reason other than the protected class reason, right? Because if it really goes sideways, that would be an easy one for them to accuse you of. And as we already saw, guilty until proven innocent. You better be able to prove that you didn't want to work with them for a reason other than a fair housing reason. Let's go to chapter 18, section 18, chapter 18. We're going to talk about taxation, another fun topic. Insurance, taxation, things that people talk about at parties. There we go. Not much. It's not much of a chapter. There's a little bit of coverage here. Just maybe a question or two that might come from this topic. We're going to identify some tax deductible items with regard to home ownership, how to calculate capital gain or loss, and some problems related to that. As brokers, though, if the T word comes up real soon into that conversation, into that inquiry, into that question from them, you're going to say, consult your CPA. You're not going to get too deep into this. You should, though, as a real estate broker, know what capital gains is about to a certain level. You're not going to like do their taxes for them and calculate the actual to the penny, but you need to understand what those benefits are to the client. It might also help you get a client. You can explain to them why owning might be better than renting, might be useful to them. But for the most part, have them call their tax advisor, call that CPA. What are the tax ramifications of selling their property? When did they buy it? How long ago did they buy it? That might factor in. Doesn't matter. Talk to your CPA about that. I'll tell you how to get it sold. I'll tell you what I'll do to get it sold for the most money and the least hassle to you. But I can't tell you what your tax ramifications, consequences will be. There are some tax deductible loan expenses. Those things can change, though, with different people in charge. These sorts of things can change. You got to stay on top of that. Don't be answering things based on how it's always been if some new legislation is passed. And other entities that aren't real estate, whether it be a political figure or another group, they love to target real estate taxation. They love to just tax when people buy a house or sell a house. We'll get the money that way. That goes back to the National Association of Realtors standing up for us, and it's why in the industry, and it's why we want to subscribe to them, because that's a political action, kind of an entity that can help keep people off the doorstep that are trying to just tax the daylights out of everything, a part of everything involved in our industry. What are some potentially tax deductible loan expenses? Interest that you pay on your mortgage for both principal and secondary homes. Mortgage interest. That's what you don't get when you're renting. You don't get that tax deduction because you're paying somebody else's mortgage. So you don't get the interest deduction because it's not yours. If you pay discount points, it got you that lower rate, but it also is a deduction. Prepayment penalties. If you end up in some sort of a loan type that charged you a prepayment penalty, that itself was probably a deduction too. You want to use the word probably, right? When you're talking to your client, what is a deduction? Talk to your CPA, but for your situation, these things are typically deductions. Is probably a deduction for you. Possibly, might be even a better word. Mortgage insurance premiums, those MIPs. Yeah, you got to pay that MIP with that FHA loan forever and ever while you have it, but at least it's a tax deduction. And those loan origination fees. The discount points and loan origination fees that we see in these calculation problems, they are both possible tax deductions. But this little batch right here is for the first year. You can't just spread those over your entire 30. It's the cost in the year of acquisition. They are deductions when you bought it. But ultimately, this might be the case for you. I'm not sure. I'm not your CPA. Talk to your CPA. Real estate taxes are deductible in the year that they're paid. So you can take that as a deduction in the year that you paid them. And they're deductible for both your primary and your secondary homes. So you've got mortgage interest as a tax deduction, and you've got property tax as a tax savings, and two things that you could use in some marketing pieces to explain why owning might be better than renting. And we're going to belabor this point. You're going to see this thing over and over because don't answer tax questions. You just need to understand kind of the gist of it. When we sell property, there's some tax consequences. And that brings to mind this thing called capital gains. A gain is something you gain, right? It's a profit. Profit of the sale of a capital asset. A gain couldn't be on more than just real estate. But in this case, we're talking about real estate capital gains. There are two categories in terms of time frame. How long did you own it? If you owned it for longer than 12 months, it is called a long-term capital gain. If you own it for less than 12 months, or I should say 12 months or less, it is called a short-term capital gain. And why does that matter? Because you're charged differently. The tax rate at which you are charged is lower when it's a long-term capital gain. So you've owned a property for 15 months. You bought it for $30,000. You're single, by the way, single, not married. You sold it for $280,000. You have pretty good gain there. And it's a long-term capital gain. So whatever the amount that you are going to be taxed on is, which we'll show you how to do that math in a minute. Let's say out of all those numbers, somehow you end up having to pay tax on $12,000 out of that whole thing. What percent of the 12,000 is it? Well, it's a long-term capital gain. So the very most it could be is a 20% tax on that 12,000. If you owned it for 12 months or 11 months or 11 months and 29 days or 2 weeks, short-term capital gain. Therefore, sorry, if your tax bracket is past 20%, you're going to be taxed on whatever your ordinary tax rate is. Depends on you, your situation, your tax bracket. So you might want to hang on to it for longer than 12 months so that you can not be taxed on 30%, because maybe that's your tax bracket, 33, 40. So the longer you keep it, the less you could pay in taxes on the amount that is considered gain. The whole $280 that you sold it for is not gain, because you didn't pay. You paid $30 to get it. There were also some real estate costs involved that have to be factored into the equation, as we will see. Here's how that works. When you bought it, you paid a purchase price, you paid some closing costs maybe, and you also, in the meantime, paid for improvements. Whatever you paid on these things is called your adjusted basis. It's where you start. Not just what you paid, but what you paid to also buy it, get it closed, and also what you've done since then. You added a room, you added a bathroom, you added a garage. Those things add in too, and they become what is called the adjusted basis. Fast forward to when you sell it, whatever you sell it for is money not in your pocket yet, because you had to pay some expenses. You've got to pay some closing costs. You also have to pay that pesky real estate broker, deadbeats. Pay both those things. That gives you the amount realized. That's what you're getting in your pocket. Now, the difference between the amount realized and the adjusted basis is what the gain is. Or in a bad scenario, what your loss is. Welcome to 2009, right? That's the formula. What is adjusted basis? Price, closing costs, improvements. What is amount realized? Sale price when you sell it. Subtract the closing costs, subtract the brokerage commission. That's how much you realized in that sale. Whatever the difference is your gain or your loss. Notice I didn't say whatever the difference is how much you pay your taxes on. Pause to let that sink in. You don't have to pay taxes on that entire gain necessarily. That's the next step in this. So we've got our adjusted basis. We'll talk about those numbers in a minute. Adjusted basis of an investment property is the original cost plus the closing cost plus the capital improvements plus special assessments minus payment of an insurance claim minus receipts for selling an easement possibly. All of that comes out to be your adjusted basis. So investment property is calculated a little differently.
Neil, can you go back to that page?
Yeah,
so I
sure,
can
sure.
take a picture of it?
Yeah,
Thank
sorry,
you.
that was quick. We good? All right. Now, we know what the calculation is to come up with the gain. It's amount realized minus adjusted basis. If you're single or married filing separately, then you do not have to pay tax on $250,000 up to $250,000 of gain. If your gain is $250,000 or less, you don't need to pay capital gains tax. If you're married, that number doubles to $500,000. By the way, this is for time limits, time frame. If you've owned that property for 2 of the previous 5 years, it's actually calculated in number of months. But people will talk about it as 2 of the previous 5 years. Not necessarily in order. You owned it and it was your residence, I should say, for the first year, and then you moved somewhere else, and then you came back a year later. Total 2 of the previous 5 years, 24 total. Could be 2 months here, 6 months there. If it adds up to 24 of the previous 60 months that you occupied it, then these rules apply. Then when you sell it and you're a single person and your gain is $250,000 or less, you don't have to pay taxes on it. If your gain is more than $250,000, that is what you pay the gain percentage rate on, the tax rate on. Let's say you're single and you own a property and the amount realized is a number and the adjusted basis is another number. And when you do that math, your gain is $260,000. If your gain is $260,000 and you lived there 24 out of the previous 60 months, how much money do you have to pay taxes on? Single person. If your gain is $260,000. Yeah. And by the way, you owned it for more than 12 months. So therefore, let's say you have to pay the maximum capital gains tax rate. How much is your capital gains tax on $10,000? What's 20% of 10,000? Right? 10% of 10,000 is 1,000 times 2 is $2,000. That's it. That's the gist of it. What if you did extra well and instead of a gain of 260, your gain was 560? You gained $560,000 on this thing. You got to pay 560. Well, you can have a gain of 560 and you're single. How much are you paying taxes on? 560 minus 250. Whoa. What's that look like? Here we go. What did I say? 560 minus 250. You're paying taxes as a single person on $310,000. Let's say it's the maximum. What's 20% of that? $62,000. What if you're dating somebody pretty seriously and you've been thinking about getting married and you want to just elope real quick? Instead of $310,000 as gain, now how much is your gain? Oops, sorry. It was 560. Yeah, 560. There it is. Your gain is $60,000. Your tax on 60,000. Nice wedding present. Great reason to get married. Just kidding. But that is a consideration. That is a thing. I'm sure people have done it. There's some other tax issues for installment sales. Remember what an installment land sale is? That's seller financing. You obviously are way out of your league for that. We are. We wouldn't give advice anyway, but we definitely aren't giving advice on that. What if it's seller financing? Talk to your CPA. Vacation homes, tax deferred exchanges. Anybody heard of a 1031 tax deferred exchange? Yeah, I thought I'd see some head nods. What is it? What's a 1031 tax deferred exchange? Yeah. It's a way, it's not a tax-free exchange. You're just putting it off. You're deferring paying taxes. It's an investment property. It's the code with the IRS is 1031. The name of it is a 1031 exchange, tax deferred exchange. You're putting it off indefinitely because they don't consider it a sale. It's an exchange. An exchange is not a sale. It's also called, you might see it called a like-kind exchange. Like-kind, real estate for real estate. Doesn't mean must be a condo if you're selling a condo. You got to buy another condo. No. Real estate for real estate, pretty much. You could have capital gains on other things that in your other assets. So the point here is you can't 1031 exchange what you made selling your vintage motorcycle, if that's even possible, and put it into real estate with a 1031 exchange. It would have to be another real estate thing. So there are certain time limits required. Don't need to know them, but with a 1031 exchange, your role in that would be the real estate side, helping them locate the property they want to exchange for. And no, they are not saying, hey, I need to find a seller for a property that wants the one I've got so I can trade. That's not that. It's we're selling the one they've got, setting aside that money to use to purchase the one they want. And there's a time frame, it's like 180 days to find it versus close, and I don't even know. But you've got to meet those within certain requirements. That's why investors using this, they got to have everybody in place so they can accomplish the time frame. Otherwise, they won't end up with the tax benefit of it being considered an exchange and deferring the taxes on it. So they could exchange this little single condo they bought for a quadplex, and then maybe a few years later they exchange the tax, they defer the tax of that sale to maybe an apartment building. They just keep growing and keep growing. What if they exchange for something that's not worth as much? Well, then they're going to have leftover money, and that money is called boot. The word is boot if you got extra money left over, and you would have to probably pay tax on the boot because you didn't end up using all of it in the exchange. You've got some money coming to you as income. Guess who wants the income tax? It's called boot. They would tax you on it probably. Yeah, the buyer or the parties to it need to know that this is a thing that's happening because there might be some time frames that need to be adhered to. There's also home office deduction available, but it's not as easy as it sounds. It can't be that, well, I sat in my 3,000-foot house with a laptop and I looked up something on the MLS so I can call my whole house my office. No, it's not that easy. There are requirements that we'll look at. When it's seller financing called installment sales, you're paying in years besides the sale. It spreads that taxation across your ownership. It's not all lumped into the upfront because you're getting it financed by the seller. So it spreads the taxation across. The home office deduction is not as simple as it sounds. It's got to be space that is exclusively used as an office in which you meet clients. It's your principal place of business, and it's a separate structure. In other words, don't give them advice on that. If your client says, I want to buy this because I want to use this as the home office, say, why don't you talk to your CPA, find out if this qualifies to be a home office and find out what is required for that to be something that can work for you. If it's a vacation home, some deductions could be disallowed if it turns out the owner is staying there more than they claim they are. If they are staying there more than they're allowed to, they can't. It's a vacation home. It's not your primary, so the owner can't use it more than 14 days or 10% of the rented time available. Must be used by it mostly must be used by other people, right? It's like you're renting it out to others. You stay there a little bit. You're allowed to, but you can't stay there 6 months and expect to get the tax deductions in the same way. Here's the like-kind exchange. Investment property or a business property, like for like. An actual exchange, in other words, you're not taking the money from the sale and spending some of it to buy the other thing and spending the other part to buy a car. Not a tax-free exchange, it's a deferral. And that boot, if you receive any in the exchange, because maybe the one you were exchanging to just didn't have the value to be used to use up all of the available money, you could be looking at having to pay that tax on that. Some math. Let's look at our formula again. Here's how we calculate gain. Sorry. There we go. So let's have a look. There we go. When we bought the property, our purchase price or the sale price was $150,000. It took some closing costs, let's say about $7,000 to get it closed, attorney fees, whatnot. We added a sunroom. We did some other improvements while we owned it in the amount of, let's say, $11,000. Fast forward to when we're selling it, and we agreed to sell it for $470,000. With great prices come great closing costs. Therefore, let's say our closing costs were, we'll make them a different number. Let's see. I'm pulling from air here. And then the brokerage fee, we had to pay that broker 6%. The other situation that you need to know is that the client in question is single. And they would have owned the property for 13 months. I know. Welcome to last year. It happened all the time. Step 1. What's the capital gain amount? Step 2. How much in taxes do they need to pay? And I will sit quietly. Okay. That capital gain amount. How do we calculate that? We needed two things. We needed an adjusted basis and an amount realized. Make a little space here. How much was the adjusted basis? Conveniently, it was these things added up. Is that 168? Now on the test, they might throw in some extra stuff here that you need to ignore. Focus on, is it a closing cost? Is it an improvement? And what was the sale price? So don't be distracted. Fast forward to this one. Sale price of 470, 6% commission on 470 is what? 28.2. Closing costs were 12,000 when we add all that fun stuff together. An amount realized of 510. How much is our gain? Is that what you're getting? It's a single client. How much are they going to be taxed on? Well, how much are they not taxed on if they're single? Yeah, 250. So they're not going to be taxed on 250. They are going to be taxed on 92.2. And at what tax rate? Let's assume the maximum possible tax rates. What tax rate are we going to calculate on this 92,200 overage? The gain was 342.2, but the amount being taxed upon is the 92.2. So what tax rate? Yeah, 20. Thank you, Danita. 20% because it's a long-term capital gain because they had it for more than 12 months. When you multiply those things together, tax is 18,440. Congratulations on selling your property. Yeesh. You know my next question.
Hey, Neil,
Hey.
the amount realized on the sales price,
Mhm.
are you factoring this in for the,
Sorry. Did I add those?
yeah,
Sorry,
'cause
I'm
that's what
sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, I threw everybody off. I totally realized that just as you were saying it. Added them together. I should have subtracted these guys. Let's redo that. Beep, burp, burp. That was the delete noises. Oh yeah, and this one. New math. 470. There's our amount realized. 429,800. Take out that 168. Capital gain 261.8. That looks a little better. Now how much is going to be taxed? 11.8. At 20%. That's much better. 2360. That's how much tax we're paying on the overage. But let's rewind it. Sorry, got married instead. Not sorry. It's going to be good news for a couple reasons. First of all, good job, you got married. Capital gain is 260. What if we subtract the married capital gain allowance? 261,800 minus 500 I'm doing this like it matters, is less than 500. Therefore, no capital gains tax. Right? They'll hinge on the married versus unmarried. They might throw some extra stuff in here to distract you. And if you're a real loser, you'll forget to subtract, you'll add instead. So watch out for those things. And the time frame. When did they own? How long did they own it? They might say the maximum using the maximum capital gains potential tax rate of 20%. Here's all the situation, and they name all this, but then somewhere in the mix, they also tell you that the person has an income tax bracket of 33%. Now you got to know, which one do I use, 20% or 33%? That's going to come back to how long did they own it, long term versus short term, right? All right. Got a few minutes here. We'll knock out the most of this one. This is a super short chapter. Basic construction. Pretty straightforward. Anybody have any construction experience? Any sort of built one? Walked through some lots maybe one time? Went to any new construction and walked through to see what they picked? People do that. Be careful though. Don't step on something. We obviously are going to learn more about this as you are in the business, OJT, on the job training. And I would suggest that you go visit new construction. Even without a client, hand in hand, go visit, go talk to those on-site agents. First of all, that on-site rep is probably used to being treated like a jerk by brokerage agents, especially when a client is in the room. Because sadly, a lot of brokerage agents, general brokerage agents, think they have to earn points, credibility points, by kind of breaking down the other side. And they will kind of flex their ego and try to just be a jerk about it. How about this? Bring your client in there. Oh, hi, Mrs. On-Site Sales Rep. You know, we spoke on the phone earlier. Make sure you speak on the phone earlier, right? You want them to know the ins and outs of the neighborhood to even before you get there and establish a little bit of rapport with them. They can help your client. They can help you and your client. I had an on-site sales rep stand up for me because I had a client who tried to go around me. They came back in town a week earlier than they claimed they were going to because they thought they could get a better price on the new construction house by not having me there. And that on-site rep did not allow it. She said, whether you let him help you or not, he's still getting paid because we don't do that. A good builder, a smart builder, a good on-site agent is going to explain to consumers, look, there are not two prices for if you have an agent versus not. Agency is sacred, right? We would not want to encourage somebody to not have their own representation. However, not all of them do that. It kind of would, because of the way we treat them, some of us, they'd kind of rather we not be there for good reason. Right? But if we did it right, they would want us to be involved. And she liked me. We liked each other. We got along and she stood up for me and I got paid. Plus it was a sales push, and it was an inventory home they wanted to buy. So not only did I get the commission, but I got a bonus too. And that guy tried to, when I stepped out of earshot, I stepped out of the house to go talk to the other one. He told that sales agent, he said, what can we do to get him out of this so I can get a better price? She wouldn't have it. Be nice to your sales reps. They also keep a short list of agents that they like and they think or do a good job, because sometimes they get buyers who need to sell a house before they can buy her product. And you might be the one that she refers them to list their house and get it sold so that she can sell them a house. And you might even get even luckier and get paid on the purchase of that one as well. Be nice. Play nice with the other children is what John Sylvia always says. So go in there. Say, we talked earlier. Clearly, you know more about this than I do. You're here every day. I'm just going to sit here quietly and, if I have a question, I'll ask it. But, do your thing. Let us know. Tell us about it. What do we need to know about this? right? Now, if they get too crazy, if they get too long-winded, step in. You know what? I really appreciate your time, but we have more to see today. We really need to go. So could we maybe wrap it up in the next couple of minutes? Nicely, cordially, right? So anyway, there's that. Go visit them and then also see, you know what, could I walk through some? Do you have any that are partially finished? Report, check in with them. Don't just go yourself. You don't want to cause problems. People do it all the time, but the proper thing to do is to go in the model and say, you know what, I'm trying to learn. I'd like to kind of see what the different stages of construction look like. Could I go in? They might ask you to wear a hard hat, which they would probably give you to borrow. And when you go in, you're going to see what we're about to talk about. We're going to look at different styles of construction, the components used, the building codes, the minimum standards by HUD, and talk about contractor licenses. And the ultimate end goal when we're dealing with new construction is the thing that lets them live there safely, called a certificate of occupancy. That is what we need in order to close on it and in order for them to be able to live there. If you have at least driven by some communities, you've seen this stuff. You've seen the skeletons grow. You've seen it start from a slab maybe, and then it gets some walls, and then it gets a roof, and then it gets the hard sheathing on the side, and you can't see what's going on much anymore until they finish the exterior. But on the inside, it looks like this. Wood framing is by far what we use the most in North Carolina. It's cheaper. Well, it wasn't there for a while, but it's cheaper than a lot of alternatives. It's back sort of to normal, I think. It gives flexibility, and it's easy to insulate so that your utility costs are lower. And it is also faster. Some of these production home builders, the reason they are production is because they can build quickly. The reason they can build quickly is they know exactly how many pieces of lumber, how many components are needed. And they can say, oh, you want to build the Jefferson floor plan with this A elevation, not the B elevation, and these colors, and there's only like 3 colors to pick from. That's what builders are doing more frequently now. They're not saying you can pick the color of every single individual thing. No, they say you must pick a palette of them. Palette A, B, or C. A comes with the white counters and the white cabinets. B comes with the white counters and the brown cabinets and the gray appliance. Oh, but I don't want, I'm sorry, you have to pick A, B, or C because we order in big chunks and it's faster and more efficient that way. That's why a production builder does it that way. Because of the efficiency, the extreme level of efficiency and systemization they use, some of those houses can get done in 4 months. It's not necessarily a great thing to have a house built fast, but that's just the way it is. All the more reason to have a good agent and to have an agent that recommends getting a home inspection, even on new construction, by the way. Advise your people to have home inspections, even on new construction. Yeah, but the city inspector doesn't matter. They're looking for minimum building codes. They're not looking at the same level of detail as a third-party home inspector would. It costs more money, I know. $500, $600, $700, $800 for a new construction inspection. It involves usually like 3 steps, by the way, not just one at the end. But I've seen some crazy things that they catch, and I've seen a lot of things that they keep catching every time, to the point where I could probably look for it. But again, I don't want that liability, right? I saw one where the top of the wall, where the roof joists sit, the thing that the ceiling's attached to when they bring the roof. You ever seen the trusses? They're triangles. And they look like, let's see here. The way they build roofs fast is not to stick build them 2x4 by 2x4, but to have them brought in from a factory. And at that factory, there was an assembly line, and they did this. They went ahead and made them in certain formations, which allows for rigidity, structural integrity, and they just stick that entire roof truss, a series of them, on top of the walls, if this is a cross section. Well, I saw a new construction one where I advised an inspection, and all of these walls, there was, where this red is that I'm putting, not the exterior walls, but the interior walls had like a half an inch gap a lot of places between where that roof truss is and the wall. In other words, it wasn't resting on the top of the wall. It was supported over here, but over time, this gap is going to become a dip. And up here in the roof, probably going to start seeing some weird things going on as things move over time. That was a pretty big find that would eliminate some problems for this purchaser down the road. And you name it, there's a million other things. So always recommend that they have these things done. What is this thing? What would you call this style of house? Good question. Jennifer, was that a question left over from capital gains? Where'd she go? Oh, there you are. Yeah. So if you got it for nothing, you didn't pay for it, then start with 0, right? It'd probably be that sort of thing. So you'd have even more gain because you had even less acquisition cost. Yeah. But consult your CPA. There might be other elements involved. Yep, there it is. Ranch. We call them ranches here. 1 stories, ranch style, good old classic. This one's probably 70s or 80s maybe. Then we have these guys. They have a little bit of stuff upstairs. I know some people like that. They got a little bit of stuff upstairs. Just kidding. No, I'm not. Not you. No, I'm not talking about other agents. I would never do that. A couple of bedrooms upstairs. 1.5 story. Maybe in the style of a Cape Cod, maybe with these dormer windows where the roof kind of juts out the front there. And you got this one that I live in, a tri-level where you walk in the front door and you're on a level that has maybe a kitchen and a living room. But then in order to get to the bedrooms, you have to go upstairs 5 or 6 steps. To get down to the other level downstairs, you got to go maybe 5 or 10 steps. There's some issues that come up with these in terms of square footage measuring. That lower level might be under the dirt, like under the grade of the yard, which means we can't give it as much credit for square footage. Whatever a square foot is worth, it's worth less when it's under grade, when it's below grade. So we need to know what we're doing when we're measuring. We're going to talk about the measuring guideline book next time. So they come with their own, and they're also sort of, they're not built much anymore. You'll see split foyer designs where you go in the front door and all you see there is a foyer and you go up or down. But these have a couple of rooms first. And so giving it a value, giving it a probable sale price can be challenging. What do you compare it to? Are there enough other split levels or tri-levels to compare it to? Maybe not. So you have to compare to singles and 2 stories and make adjustments. Overall, I'd say a tri-level is worth less than either of those other kinds. I'd give it a penalty for that. I would tell the seller, we're probably going to get less for yours unless yours has so many more upgrades than anything else out there. Probably just because of the style, it's going to get less. Contemporaries, we don't see that much. We see them on HGTV, California, Florida. They're very minimal, right? No shutters usually. The fireplace is just maybe a hole in the wall for the fireplace. No hearth, no mantle. But it's a cool look. Maybe a flat roof, which comes with its own challenges. Flat doesn't get water runoff as fast as angled roofs. But these are various styles that you might see out and about. Out of all of them, which is the most expensive to build? Which out of all of these cost the most to build brand new? I see our time. Once we talk about this, we'll be done. Yeah, the 1 level. If that was, maybe that was a leftover answer. This guy, because a couple of reasons. Number one, the footprint requires a larger lot. To build a 2,000 foot house, if it's a 1 level, it's going to look like this on the lot. Same lot size, if it's a 2 level, it could look like this. So you need more lot because you have to also maybe allow for the setback lines. And then also, how big is the roof? on a one level, the roof is big enough to be over 2,000 square feet. But on a two level, the roof only needs to be big enough to be over 1,000 square feet because you've got them stacked on top of each other. We'll talk about the rest of this and we'll get on into, gosh, that brings us back to license law and commission rules and review. And we've got a couple of full days of review available. So now's the time that you start asking some big time questions. Go through those tests, math, whatever, bring them and ask them in the meantime. Notion's fine. And we'll talk all about all that sort of stuff. What day is it? Wednesday. So that'll be Monday. I'll see you next week. Have a great weekend.
Hey Neil.
Hey.
Hi. So on the Learn Test Pass,
Mhm.
I see the combination package for the PSI and the state test,
Mhm.
but I don't see one for like the class exam.
Oh, there is
That-
not.
There is not. Okay, so it's just that. So for the class, did we just practice the stuff that we
Exactly.
printed out that you sent us?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I'll see you next week.
Okay. Hey, lady.
Bye.
Hi, bye. Thanks for your participation today.
Oh,
It's good to have firsthand information about someone who actually lives in that kind of neighborhood. Did you not buy something in Mooresville first? No, I guess I was confused. I was thinking you lived in one of those communities that sort of tries to pretend like they're 55, but they're not officially 55 and older. I was thinking you might have been in one of those first, but you moved from South Charlotte up to this one that you're
right,
in now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we were
Good.
in our house 28 years.
That's big.
Long
It's a
time.
big adjustment, but that's a nice place to adjust to.
Yes, I love it. I just do. I really love it.
I'm glad.
Take care. Have a wonderful
Okay,
weekend.
you too.